My name is Rotimi Olanio, and it's my pleasure to welcome us all to the 2021 Walker's Day Masterclass from ExperientialNG. So wherever you are today, we thank you for spending your morning hours with us. I would hope that perhaps you've gotten your coffee ready, and maybe a snack where you are. Certainly a notebook and a pen, or maybe your laptop or your personal digital aid, because over the next few hours, I think we promise that you will be receiving excellent content, educational content, particularly in the area of strategy, strategic thinking, leadership, and what it means ultimately to be a professional or a marketing practitioner in today's world. Now, I will very quickly just share my screen, my slides, so that we can get us up to par. So let me just share my screen and hope that the tech works for me. Just bear with me a few minutes as I try to do that. We will have support from our guys, our technical guys. One second. Okay. For the guys in tech, I think, could you just check to make sure that I don't have any issues? Okay, thank you. Right, so I believe that you can see my slides now. And so once again, just welcome to all of us, wherever we may be on this wonderful May the 1st. Now, over the next couple of hours, as I said, we're going to have a very interesting time. And just to kind of establish what the objectives of today's session is, we basically, and to introduce ExperientialNG, of course. ExperientialNG is basically a resource platform that has been put together to support those in the marketing and allied services industry. We offer three key features in terms of benefits or value to those who subscribe to the community that we're trying to build. And that first and foremost is knowledge, a knowledge basis. So we have a lot of training programs, workshops, masterclasses, which is all intended to help improve the quality of the practitioner within the field of marketing services and marketing at large. We also do a lot of work in the area of toolkit development, which is basically putting in place all sorts of platforms, information, and resources that can help our marketing people to be able to do a better job. And finally, we also try to work in the area of intelligence, news, worthiness, and therefore making sure that we're serving a community of practice in such a way that we're able to build them out into competent practitioners. It is in pursuance of that objective or that mission or that sense of purpose that we have invited all of you to gather here with us today, and ultimately to share with us over the next couple of minutes, hopefully relevant knowledge which will bring you up to speed, and to also introduce you to some of the thinking or some of the resource materials and content, as well as thought leaders that we have available, keen and generous enough to share their experience, their wealth of experience, and their technical expertise. Now, today's focus and theme is on the strategic marketing, on strategic marketing thinking for marketing and services leaders. And hopefully over the next couple of hours, it is our expectations that we will be joined indeed by quite a lot of these leaders who have already signified interest to be with us. We also have a few of our students, current students working with us across a range of subjects, course areas such as, I think, experiential marketing, sponsorship particularly, who are also present. Later on today, during the course of our intermission, we will also be honoring some students who have successfully finished their programs with the with Experiential NG and awarding them their certificates. So I think that will be something which we really are looking forward to. Now, this is the way the program is going to run. We were really supposed to have started at 9, but we thought to let the people gather, and so we gave a few minutes, which really I should be ending my talk now and basically moving on to introduce the next person. But the order of the event will be as follows. Mr. Austin Ofomba, who I will introduce shortly, will be taking us through strategic thinking. We will then cut away to the hybrid studios in Lagos, where we have an audience of some of our participants, and we have our rapporteur and course director, Mr. Tunji Adeyinka, who is also, by the way, Group CEO of Republican Group, one of Nigerians and West Africa's leading marketing services group. We will then return to the online platform at about 10:15 to then have Mr. Stuart Hamilton, who I will also introduce very shortly, take us through some very, very interesting content in the area of practical leadership. We'll return again to the hybrid studios in Lagos at about 11, slightly behind that now, for another set of recognitions. And then I will, at the end of that, just basically take us through a couple of slides on the whole conversation around what it means to be a reflective practitioner and to be a leader developing a learning organization. And then hopefully we'll wrap things up, and we hope that by the end of the day at about 12:15 or thereabouts, our academy practice, our program manager, Mrs. Tokpe Musu, will then give us the vote of thanks. So this is how we hope to run through that. Just to very quickly introduce those who we will be sharing, who will be generous enough to share their knowledge with us today. We start with Mr. Austin Ofomba, who currently is the CEO of Tryon Group. He's also a man who has over the years served for over the last 24 years in different capacities across a wide range of diverse experiences in both sales and marketing, in strategy, general management, public-private partnership, advisory, and right up to, of course, even public sector as well as finance. He served as marketing director of Coca-Cola Nigeria, as well as marketing director of Guinness Nigeria, which is a part of the Diageo Worldwide Group. And these are two of Nigeria's most prestigious consumer marketing companies. He has that rare feat of being one of the few who has basically been able to serve at that level across two, not one, but two multinational companies in a very difficult and a very dynamic market. While there, Austin was responsible for far-reaching strategic initiatives, and in recent times, he's now tended a little bit towards public-private sector growth initiatives. Austin will be speaking to us about strategic thinking for marketing leaders. Mr. Stuart Hamilton comes after. Stuart is currently the director of Breakthrough Scotland, who are our partners, and we will introduce that shortly. But he's also the head of international trade at the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, which is an aggregation of all the chambers of commerce, leading chambers of commerce within Scotland, representing almost 12,000 companies across, who ultimately make Scotland home one way or the other. Stuart is an international business and trade development specialist with over 40 years of experience across multiple sectors with specific involvement in construction, IT, as well as oil and gas. Now, he has strong background, as I said, in international trading and large contracts, as well as currently overseeing the international trade arm of the Scottish Chambers of Commerce. One of the things which is important to note is that Stuart is also a leadership coach, a certified leadership coach and mentor and advisor with a huge amount of experience in helping small to medium-sized companies focused on achieving breakthrough transformation. and he brings his wealth of experience and generously to share with us today. Stuart will be speaking on practical commercial leadership lessons from Europe. So thank you so much, Stuart, by the way, and Austin, for being so generous and joining us, and to share your wealth of experience today. Just to also introduce a few of the actors, as we normally call them, who will be involved in this. My partner in this journey, Mr. Tunji Adinka, who is an editor at large, as well as a course director at ExperientialNG, will be a rapporteur while also chairing the function in the physical space at the Hybrid Studio. He is a man who has over 20 years to 22 years worth of experience, having worked in large corporates and multinationals in both the B2B and the consumer side. Started his career as a copywriter, for those who might be interested in that, in the agency world. But today he sits as the group CEO of Republican Group, which has various brands, in other words, subsidiary companies playing in different areas of the marketing communications industry. And finally, we have our very own Lolo Tokpe Nwusu, who is the Academy Program Manager. She will be giving the vote of thanks. She literally has been the person who's put the physical project together alongside our partners at Abellini's, who, by the way, we must also thank, and she will do that, I'm sure, properly at the end of the day. And she ultimately is responsible for looking after all our various students, our learners who are keen to get necessary support from the platform. So it is, again, really, really my honor to welcome all of you today and to thank you for choosing to invest the next couple of hours with us. I can assure you that this will be time definitely very, very well spent indeed. So welcome, and I will now stop sharing and I will pass on, I believe, to Mr. Austin Ufomba, who will now take the stage, the digital stage, I guess, and share his thoughts on strategic leadership strategic thinking, I beg your pardon, for marketing leaders. Thank you very much. A round of applause wherever you are for Mr. Ufomba. Austin, can you hear me? I'm going to stop sharing and invite Austin.
Loud and clear, I can hear you.
All right. Over to you, sir.
Hello, everyone, and good morning to all the attendees of this session of ExperientialNG. I want to say a big thank you to Rotimi and the team for putting together this great platform, which we marketeers in Nigeria have always looked up to as a platform to share our knowledge, share our experience, and also board new marketing experts in Nigeria. So I just want to check that everyone is hearing me. I have the next 45 minutes to do justice to this topic, strategic thinking for marketing leaders. And I'll just put my slideshow. Just a second. Okay, so I'm going to take you through strategy thinking for marketing leaders. And like Rotimi rightly introduced me, I've been in marketing almost all through my my working career, having spent a lot of time in both Guinness and Coca-Cola at different times. And I can say it was a great experience working for those two companies. And one of the things I'll be doing now is to share my experience with you around this topic of strategy thinking. And basically, I know many of us on the platform already do strategy. That I'm very sure of. So it might not be new to many of us, but for those of you that strategy will be new to, I can tell you that it's one of the most interesting part of the job that requires the brain and the heart to do. So this is just a session to largely remind us, for those of us who are already doing strategy, for those of us who are in leadership positions, it's an opportunity for your leadership capability to be reignited. It's an opportunity to make us all better, make you better. It's also an opportunity for us to reflect on what we've been doing at work. Are we getting it right? Are we not getting it right? So that's it. So the objectives of this session largely, I will introduce the concept of strategy. Then I'll delve into strategic thinking, and also delve into a bit of study on the process that organizations go through to develop marketing strategy. I mean, this is what I've done all through my life, so I'll be able to share with you life examples, practical examples of how strategic thinking works and ultimately how you get to develop a strategic plan. Then I'll also like to review game-changing case studies. I mean, many of us use products, many of us buy services, and we don't know how those products come to the marketplace. I'm sure it's by the end of this session, you see the quality of thinking and the quality of work and the heavy lifting that goes through a very deep, strategic thinking process to get that product or service out there to you. And of course, like Rotimi rightly pointed out, we'll also be giving you a sneak preview of what will be happening back end of 2021 and then 2022 in terms of strategic marketing models that I'm sure many of you will be interested in. I'm sure many of you would like to be great marketeers. Many of you want to be the best at your workplace. So it's important that you really, take a look at this platform that will be growing and developing itself in the future into bigger platforms for training and development. And we'll be sharing with you in the area of strategic marketing, some of the models that we'll have. Now, let's go into the topic proper. Concept of strategy and strategic thinking. Why has this become so important? Why has this become so critical in everything we do at work or even in our personal lives? Like I said, for those of us that have been doing strategy or for those who already have done it so well, you can never have enough of good strategy because good strategy is the bedrock of everything we do in terms of product development, in terms of achieving our goals. But there's always a big challenge around strategy, which is why I'm so passionate about it. And I would really like everyone to pay some good attention in the next few minutes. Because having worked in big organizations, I've realized that some don't believe that you need the right strategy to work. Some don't even believe you need to do strategy. Some are so tactical. And I can tell you, if you're a practical thinker or tactical doer, you can never achieve great things. I mean, there's no big idea today. There's no big organization. There's no success story that hasn't come out through proper strategy and strategic thinking. I mean, if you think tactically and if you act tactically, I can tell you, you will always crash in not too long a time. But over time, we've also realized that very few organizations actually end up developing good strategy. And that's why most companies fail. I mean, you hear that 95% of startup companies have failed. I can tell you largely, if you look at the issues why they have failed, strategy and strategic thinking will be part of it. Not thinking broadly, not thinking through it properly, not connecting the dots. Those are usually the issues. Even if you go to existing companies, you hear leaders saying, oh, well, let's just go and do it. We don't have time and all that. So leaders don't want to commit time and resources to the process of strategy and strategic thinking. And that is why some organizations do better long-term than others, because some have thought through their journey from day 1 to 5 years and are able to execute all through the line for those 5 years, while some are always doing what we call lastminute.com or are very tactical or just think by the day and act by the day. Those ones hardly survive. So at the end of the day, strategy is a crucial part of all we do. It's a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall goal. So if you're planning to build an organization, if you're planning to build a brand, if you're starting a company or you're starting a product and you want that product to really survive the market for 5-10 years, then you've got to think at least 5 years or 3 years. So that's the whole idea of saying strategy, is a plan of action, and that action are different activities, that make up the action over time, to help you achieve your long-term or overall goal. So it mustn't be a 5-year thing. So for instance, if it's an activity, if it's a goal that you have to achieve in 6 months, you can also have a strategy to achieve your goal in 6 months. But largely for most organizations, strategy will usually longer than 1 year. Strategy is what we broadly intend to do to reach our long-term goals or objectives. So it's something that we have to do to reach our long-term goals and objectives. I mean, we've always heard it, whether it's in public sector or private sector, that if you don't define a vision for yourself, if you don't define a vision for your organization, you can't have a direction. So it is important that everyone within a team, it's important that everyone within an organization clearly have goals, mapped out goals and are following the direction. And it is this strategic plan, it is this strategic thinking process that helps encapsulate, puts together that whole journey for you, just so that it is clear and everybody sings from the same hymn book, from the same strategy hymn book, for the same evaluation and implementation hymn book. So that is the whole essence of why we should do strategy. But more importantly, in my words, strategy binds our game, what I call game, which is goals, activity, measurement, and evaluation. And let me be very clear. If you do not have a goal, don't even start a strategy, because I don't know how, it's not possible. If you don't have a clear goal, you can't go through a strategic thinking process. You can't run a strategy, because ultimately the essence of a strategy is to help you achieve your goal. So the first thing in this process is even understand where you want to go to. Where am I heading to? In very clear terms. That is the goal. If you don't have it, don't bother starting at all. You can't have a strategy. You're just wasting time. It is then your goals that will then define through that process of strategic thinking that you then begin to have activities. You begin to have how you measure those activities and then how you evaluate what you have done. And ultimately, that's why I said that strategy binds your game plan and creates a strong link to execution. More often than not in organizations, I'm sure many of you work in great organizations, you always say, you know what? Our execution is not linked to strategy. Everything we agreed to do, we're acting differently. That is because you don't have a strong strategic plan. Because if you have a strong strategic plan, it will be linked to each other. There will be dots connecting your strategy to your final execution and even measurement. So ultimately, strategic thinking is an intentional and rational thought process that focuses on the analysis of critical factors and variables that will influence the long-term achievement of set goals. Strategic thinking is a very deep process. And you get to see that in some of the tools I'm going to share. You see that in some of the frameworks I'm going to share. It is deep. It is all-encompassing. It is rigorous if you want to do it well. It requires what I call heavy lifting, if you want to go through that process. And that is why many organizations get it wrong. If you don't want to really invest time, invest resources, invest the right people, invest the patience, in going through that strategic thinking. I'm sure many of you, even in your personal lives, when you sit down to crack a problem, when you sit down to think, I can imagine, the depth it requires. I can imagine, you want to go to a quiet place, you want to invest time, you don't want anybody to disturb you. It's the same process. You have to process a lot of information. You have to gather a lot of information. All that is required for your strategic thinking process to make sense. So it's deep, it's wide, it's all encompassing. It involves quite a lot. Now, I would borrow this strategic tool from McKinsey. It's a great one I love to share, and it just basically tells you about the rules of strategic thinking. And this is almost like the rule of the thumb. It's not cast in stone. You could also have some additional rules, I can tell you, But like I said earlier, strategic thinking process it seeks for hard information. It's not it's not surface driven. You've got to be deep. You've got to ask a lot of questions, Strategic thinking process is fact-based. You can't run a strategy based on hearsay, based on I think, based on I want to guess. Based on internet information. You can't do that. Strategic thinking has to be fact-based and a lot of logical information, meaning you've got to analyze, and then begin to mold some logics, build algorithms based on a pattern and all that. The most interesting part of strategic thinking, is the fact that you question everything, even the ones that have not been questioned. You always ask the why. You can never be shy of asking why. Even for the things you assume you always question them. You peel the onion completely till you get to the core. That is one of the key elements of strategic thinking. Again, based on this McKinsey tool, it also says that it's very pervasive. I said that earlier. It is wide, it penetrates, it is deep. It's not a surface thing. You keep penetrating, you keep going down until you hit what we call the aha moment. If you've not hit the aha moment, or if you've not met the eureka moment, then you are not there. You've got to keep asking why. It's pervasive until you get a logical sense of something that really works for you. And then, of course, strategic thinking is not about the usual. It's about exploring for what you don't. It's about exploring beyond what you know. So I would say for everything you do in strategic thinking or in molding your strategy, these 4 basic rules, are very critical. Like I said, this is a rule of thumb. There might be as many other rules that you can apply depending on your organization, but just ensure that you follow a framework or a set of rules that matter. So now I said earlier that strategic thinking starts with knowing where you are going. If you don't know where you are going, forget it. You can't even, it's like, let's even take a simple trip. You get into your car and you don't know where you're driving to. So how are you going to move? You're going to be so confused. You can't even start your ignition if you don't know where you are going to. If it's where you have to use the navigator, you can't even set your navigator. Imagine a pilot who doesn't have a trip. Where are you going to fly to? How are you going to set all the parameters of the plane to know your distance, to know your flight route, to know if the weather is okay? It's impossible. So a good example is basically when a pilot's flight, you must be very clear, even before the journey. Where am I going to? Where am I going to stop? And usually when pilots fly, a pilot is not saying I'm going to Nigeria. No. Or let's even use an airport in US. Like if you go to a place like Washington, D.C., I'm sure they probably have like 3-4 airports. It doesn't say I'm flying to Washington, D.C. No, it tells you the particular airport. So that is how strategy is. That's how strategic thinking is. You've got to be laser focused, laser clear on where you're heading to. So that is the first thing, even before you say anything. And I've used a typical flight journey, to try to explain it. And so there are basically 3 other things that basically matter in terms of when you're going through the strategic process. So there's got to be a position. So beyond the fact that you need to know where you're heading to, you need to really understand your strategic position. So for you to take a flight, you must be somewhere. You must be somewhere. A pilot is not going to start his flight from his bedroom or from his hotel or from the city. No, a pilot's flight starts from when he gets into that plane and takes a position in the plane. Then he has a clear position. Then he can then scan the environment, because that is very, very important. Then also one of the critical things is also your strategic choices. Now, when a pilot has gotten into the plane and begins to basically set his route map and begins to do the weather checks and all that, I'm sure you know that he has the option to basically set his parameters to give you the best flight. So most times they'll tell you, the weather is not so great, so we have to like do this, do a detour and all that, or fly low and all that. That's exactly what strategic choices are, because it's never one size fits all. You've got to make choices. And then, of course, at the end of the day, when the pilot has set the plane and the plane takes off, there is a strategy in action. There's a process. He has set the map and it takes off. So typically, these are the 3 key fundamentals, that are required, in a strategic thinking process. Now, for different organizations, whether it's a service industry, whether it's manufacturing industry or whatever, there are different strategic thinking frameworks that work for everyone. There's so many of them. Now, I have 3 here, and all of them, if you look at them, they all lead to the same thing. I'm sure if you are viewing my screen, if you look at them very well, let me take the first one. The first one basically speaks to the fact that, there's got to be that research phase. So you've got to scan the environment. You've got to know where you are. I talked about that earlier. Where am I? Where am I? Where am I? What's my environment? So if you're dealing with customers, you need to hear the voice of customers. You need to understand or have an insight into employee insights and engagements. And then you begin to do even benchmarking versus competition. So that sort of gives you that whole current situation analysis of the environment you're dealing with. And then before you begin to envision, go into the strategic planning and then ultimately have an operational plan. So I'm speaking to the first one now, the first model. So it could be that simple, depending on how your organization is. If it's a small organization, you don't need to make it too complex. You can really keep it simple. You can keep it that simple, And then the second one also reinforces what I just said with the first strategic thinking model. The first stage is always about gathering information. You can analyze what is changing, and you'll see examples. So if you have an existing product, or you are in a particular business, whether it's insurance, banking, or whatever, the first thing you have to do basically in this strategic planning process is analyze what is changing. Doing a strategic audit. What is happening in the market? What's happening with consumers? What's happening in the nation? What's happening in the global space? And then things changing. What do we have to learn? Then you reflect on all the information you've gotten, all the things you know. Now, I'm speaking to the ones in the yellow band, and then, of course, you go into formulating ideas. So with all you are predicting ideas. So you get into that predictive stage, based on what we know. Could it be A? Could A work, or could it be B or C? And then you then go into deciding where you should be going to, after having different choices. And of course, in doing that, you are minding the gaps, knowing fully well that, there are risks and opportunities. So you do your risk metrics and all that. Ultimately, it still leads you to a plan of actions, creating more options, checking options that make sense, deciding to implement, and of course, implementing and evaluating. So typically, I'm sure these slides will be shared with you. The three frameworks from three different organizations, look very similar, and ultimately lead you through the same journey, and it's the same output. So I'm just saying, strategic thinking process it's same everywhere. It's same principle, it's same framework, it's same thought process, it's the same depth of work that is required anywhere. Depending on irrespective of the organization, irrespective of the country, irrespective of the life stage of the organization, whether it's big or small. All that might just be different is the complexity and the time you spend, and the time you need to spend. So now let's sort of go into deepening the concept of marketing strategy. We've talked about strategy. We've then talked about strategic thinking, which is the whole process of getting your strategy to work. For marketeers who are in the room, and who are on this platform, I just want to say that there are different areas of marketing strategy development. So different areas, and it could even be more than what you're seeing on my screen. It all depends on just what your portfolio is, what your product is, what's the kind of company, whether it's a service company or whatever. But just know that there are different levels, and you need to get one level right before the next one. Otherwise, you'll be dealing with the wrong pillars. You'll be dealing with the wrong framework. You'll be dealing with the wrong foundation. So, for instance, let's say I'm working for a biscuit company, and the biscuit company has decided to basically play in the lower end value space of the biscuit market. Let's just make that assumption. So you need a business strategy that basically captures that. We don't want to sell expensive biscuits. Our biscuits are value for money, meaning that we have to be cost conscious, meaning that we are targeting quite a lot of consumers. So that's your business strategy. So you're thinking now the business at large. And then when you are very clear on your business strategy, then I can tell you the marketing guys can then decide that this is how we are going to market our product, because now you understand where the business is heading to. You understand the overall broader business goals. So this is our target for the year. This is our profit for the year. This is the level of penetration we want to hit in the market and all. So you understand those broad business goals. Then marketing then takes on from there. to then say, okay, now we have to develop a marketing strategy that supports the business. It's not the other way around. A business strategy does not take a leap from a marketing strategy. You must start from the top. Business strategy, then marketing strategy. Then even within the marketing strategy, so for instance, again, within a biscuit company, you might have different portfolio, you might have different brands, which makes a portfolio within the company. So again, using the biscuit company, you might decide to have one that is a group of products that is fat free. You might have another group that basically you could call what's it called, sugar free. You can have another one that basically, so you can have different product types within within that company, and each of them is in that portfolio, and they will also have their own strategy as you cascade down to begin to execute. And even within each of those brand and product groups, you then begin to have pricing strategy. Where do we make our margins? Which ones are really more of value? Which ones are mainstream and all that? And then when it even comes to marketing execution again, you then even again begin to draw down, to your distribution strategy, to your visibility strategy, and to your promotion strategy. So the point I'm trying to make here is that strategy is all encompassing. It is through the line. You can't be very strategic at the top and then become too tactical at the end. It wouldn't work. The dots must have to connect. So your promotion strategy, your visibility strategy, as you can see in this slide, your distribution strategy must all be leading up to your business strategy. They must all be leading up to your marketing strategy. They must all be leading up to your portfolio strategy. That is the way strategy works. The dots must be connected. Now let's look at the typical, like I said, this session now is about deepening our understanding of strategy and strategic thinking. And let's look at one brand or one company that I would say I'm very passionate about. And that's Uber. And I'm sure there's hardly anyone in this session who either has not heard of Uber or who has not used it. So I'd like to share the Uber case study with you. And look at from day one. Like I said, the guy set a very clear goal. Remember, I started by saying, if you don't have a goal, do not bother going into a strategy session. Do not bother going into strategic thinking because it's a complete waste of time. It's like building a house if you don't have a foundation. It's like starting a journey or starting your car if you don't have a destination. It doesn't work. So these guys basically, they were very clear. They were so clear on what they wanted to do. Garrett Camp, and Travis, I think they went to France for something during very cold winter, very cold, chilly winter. And it wasn't that easy getting a taxi. For those people who've been, who have traveled abroad for many years, I was telling Rotimi this story sometime in the week on how I see this, how Uber has changed how we enjoy our trips when we travel now. In those days, when you get into America or you get into Europe or anywhere, especially in America, you have to take those expensive limousines from the airport, and they're very expensive. And then you have to wait for your host to either take a vacation or take time off to be able to take you to different places of your different destinations. Otherwise, if you have to use their taxi, then you still have to pay heavy dollars for them. So it was very expensive. So I can understand why these two guys, Garrett and Travis, went to Europe and had to pay $800, to just from one point to another. And that was what ignited this whole Uber. So you can see there was an insight. There was a clear insight. There was a goal. And they said, how do we make transportation as reliable as running water? Everywhere for everyone. You can see the quality of thinking from an issue that they experienced life, to how they transformed it into an idea. And you will see how they went through the strategic thinking process to be able to get out what I'll call today a perfect solution to a need that everyone needs. And it wasn't just about, creating that reliable transportation. They actually went beyond that. They also said, we will welcome people from all backgrounds who seek the opportunity to help build a future where everyone and everything can move independently. So the guys were very clear on their mission. They were so clear on their goal. And today, what has happened? There's a game-changing story, which everyone can connect with. And I'm sure many of you know this story more than me. Today, they have disrupted the market. So the Uber, the disruptive peer-to-peer ride-sharing service, has practically decimated the traditional taxi cab industry. I was also sharing with a friend during the week. In our heydays, as brand managers and assistant brand managers, when we used to travel a lot across the country, it was always tough to get taxis as well from the airport. And when you want to get these taxis, what happens? They charge you an arm and a leg. There was no competition. It was just a monopoly. So when you land at the airport, you were just there. It wasn't structured. So you were basically, you had to depend on them. And at times you even struggle with the cars that were not properly assessed and all that. And you can imagine how difficult it was then. Then if you needed to go to the airport, you needed to call a friend to go and drop you and all that. So the issues were just there and the opportunity was as large as anything. But today, these guys have created an idea that have basically decimated the traditional taxi cab. And I'm sure if you look at the population today of the taxi cabs versus what it was many years back, you see, we now have a structured transport system created by this game-changing idea. And it's the same whole process. These guys, after they went through that challenge, of not being able to get a taxi on time and paying $800 for just a destination trip from point A to point B, they came back and did a deep analysis. And they did a strategic audit. They reflected. So they gathered a lot of information, as you can see at the top of my screen. Information gathering, what we call heavy lifting. They weren't lazy about it. More often than not, we get lazy about strategy. We're always in a hurry. You can't be in a hurry when you're going through a strategic thinking because you have to get it right. It's got to be deep and it's got to be done very well. And I'm sure they went to different countries, they gathered information, how people move, the challenges with transportation, the cost of transportation and all. They did all that survey, research, audit, and reflected on all the responses they got. And of course, based on those responses, they got their insights and then their aha moment. And the aha moment was when they realized that this opportunity is not just for America alone, or it's not just for Europe alone. Everyone wants to move. Everyone needs to achieve their dream. Everyone needs to achieve their goals. And for them to achieve their dream and goals, they need to move. And we will help people achieve their dreams. We will move people from point A to point B. We will make transportation as reliable as tap water. And when I mean tap water now, that's where tap water actually works in developed countries, And then I went ahead to formulate the ideas, and of course, the rest is history today. We all use Uber pretty well. So that is a process of proper strategic thinking. And you can see their Uber strategic plan. So this is what we call a board. At the end of the day, your strategic plan is summarized in a board like this that clearly shows you how robust you've thought through the entire business. And you can see everything feels so covered in this, from their key activities to their key partners, key resources, their value proposition, their revenue streams. Everything is so well captured. This is a plan. So the question I'll ask everyone listening to me today, when you finish your plan or when you finish your strategic process, what do you get? What do you get at the end of that strategic process? What does your strategic plan look like? Does it end up to something as very detailed as this? If it's not, then know that you've not done your plan well. Just know that you've not done your plan well. The taste of the pudding is in the eating. And for me, a good strategic process at the end of it is when you have a good plan. Because your plan will tell you if you've gone through the processes with the kind of depth, with the quality of people, with the time and resources required to go through that whole strategic thinking process. Like I said, I'm not going to waste time on this. This is something we can all review and share with each other. I'm sure Marketing NG team will share with you, so you can always review this to see what it's like at the end of the day. Now, it's not just Uber. I'm sure we also have we've seen a couple of other companies that have done so well, both international and local. And I'd like you at your spare time, you can just take a look at an Airbnb. I mean, Airbnb is an amazing product idea that, again, has gone through this rigorous strategic thinking process to be able to develop a plan that has been well executed today. I don't think there's any hotel chain that is as big as Airbnb. None. Literally every street has an Airbnb. So these guys have created what I'll call almost like a hotel chain without building one, without putting one block into the soil. I mean, how amazing. I mean, you can imagine the Zooms of this world, the Facebook, the Google. So all this, I mean, just read about these companies and how they were able to develop products, or how they've been able to develop their businesses, through rigorous strategic thinking process, having clear strategy in mind and being able to implement that strategy, by almost a flawless executional process. And then in Nigeria, I mean, we've got a couple of good examples. I'm not going to waste time to go through each and every one of them. Biggie Cola, I used to work in the cola industry, and I know how this company came in, saw the opportunity, to basically sell value price product, penetrate 80% of Nigerians who are within the DE socioeconomic class, who don't want to pay more for the more expensive brands. And today, Biggie Cola has just become such a big brand. I mean, their market share is just amazing, unbelievable. How they are challenging a Coca-Cola and a Pepsi from nowhere. I mean, same thing with Origin. When I launched Origin, I mean, it's quite an interesting one as well. How we're able to basically, through the strategic thinking process, pick an idea from the marketplace, and through that rigor of strategy and thinking through it properly, we're able to develop a product that in 18 months became such a phenomenal success, almost raking in close to 30 billion in 18 months. I'm not sure there's any beverage brand or any launch product that has been launched in this market, at least within this category, that has this level of runaway success, within the first 3 years of launch. It's amazing. And again, I know what we did. It took the same rigor that I've explained to you to manage the process of development, the process of launch, and of course, of managing the brand. And I'm sure those who are managing the brand today have also taken up from the shoulders of those that launched it, to do a phenomenal job. And then, of course, I mean, if you come to the IT space, we've heard of FluterWave, ULesson, and of course, even our AirPs are local examples of people who have seen opportunity and have basically, through some real deep work. I mean, how did AirPs in less than 4 years have become such a phenomenon, not just in Nigeria and West Africa, and are now doing sport international trips? These are not just by being tactical. You can't build these brands, you can't build these businesses, you can't build this level of success, these organizations I'm showing on my screen today, without basically going through having a proper strategy and a strategic thinking process to take you on that journey. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything I want you to leave with today, is this slide. Because many of you who are sitting back will be asking, so yeah, I mean, strategic thinking process, it's something we do already. But like I said, one of the critical things I want you to really take home today is the fact that this is a reminder, this is a wake-up call, this is reigniting what you know that is sitting somewhere and you've not been using it. The essence of this masterclass is to make each and every one of us better at this process of strategic thinking. And then for many of you who are leaders, Or even for those of you who are managers, whatever position you hold in an organization, is an opportunity for you to go back and reflect. How exactly have I been driving the strategy for the business that I work for? Whether it's your private company or it's an organization you work for, it's an opportunity for you to reflect. I'd like everyone to go back today, look at your plans again. Look at your plans again and reflect. But ultimately, some of the takeaways I want you to leave this session with, especially with the Uber case study and other game-changing brands I've also shared, whether it's Airbnb, Zoom, and others, is that you have to be the strategic thinker in your organization. You have to be the strategic thinker in your organization. If you really want to be that person who everyone looks up to, if you want to be that game changer, if you want to be that person who wants to be promoted to become the MD, to become the executive director in sales, marketing, whatever it is, one of the key criteria is that you have to be a strategic thinker. Go and look for the things that make a leader. You don't have to be a doer. If you're just that person who is very tactical, who all he or she does is to do work today, you can't be successful. You can't be an achiever. So it is very critical for you to learn or to better yourself or to be an expert or to build additional capability in this whole in strategy and strategic thing. Well, that's what will make you a leader. So take leadership through strategic thinking. So if you're thinking of the next promotion or you're thinking of leading your function, the first 2 points on this slide, you have to take it very seriously. And then strategic thinking really works, but it's only as good as your strategic execution. So note, you can't have a good strategy, go spend the whole 3, 4, 6 months that companies spend on strategic thinking process, have a strategy, have a strategic plan, and then you become tactical. And then you expect a good result. You will not get a good result. So ultimately, I want you to live with the fact that your strategy is only as good as your execution. In fact, some will tell you that your strategy is your execution. And then for a lot of startups that are here, or for brand managers that are here, or for assistant brand managers that are here, don't give up on your bright ideas. I mean, we've looked at the Uber case study, and I'm sure you can all read up about Airbnb, read up about Zoom, how they started. And they had a plan. Because the thing about not having a strategic plan or not going through a strategic process is that you lose out on some key fundamentals. You lose out on some key fundamentals. If you don't plan, you don't have a long-term perspective. So you don't know how to build layers, and you don't know how to measure your success. If you plan, you'll be able to say, okay, I have a plan for 3 years. And then you can have milestones. And when you have milestones, you can then measure those milestones. But the challenge is when you don't have a strategic plan, then you get too tactical and you don't measure anything. The other thing about when you have a strategic plan also is that you are able to understand your strengths and weaknesses. And then one would say, okay, but even if we don't do strategy, we know our strengths and weaknesses. Yes. But the question is, when you do a strategy, you are not taking a conscious effort to leverage your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses. So again, part of the thing you must learn from, again, this whole session and lessons from Uber is you can never have a great strategy or go through a good strategic planning process or thinking process without a great team. Because strategy requires brain power. It requires some level of knowledge. It requires some level of diversity because you've got to think broadly. There's got to be a lot of heavy lifting. So most times when you have the same set of people in the room who think alike, you don't get it right. So you must have a great and diverse team. You must invest in you must put in the right investments, whether it's time and resources, and you must try to create a near perfect solution. But more importantly, I would like to leave this slide by saying, if you're doing your strategy, keep it as simple. Keep it very simple. ordinary things in an extraordinary way. Don't make it too complex. When a strategy is too complex and the execution becomes too complex, you cannot execute it. It just becomes a piece of paper. I mean, look at the overall strategy. Look at the issues that instigated the thinking process. Look at how they went through the strategic process. Look at how they found an answer. Look at how simple the answer was. Very simple things, but solving extraordinary problems. So this is one killer slide that I want everyone to leave this session with. And if you really apply this in your day-to-day work, or if you reflect on this in any work you've done in the past, you might be able to, I'm sure you will see a great improvement in your results or your desired results. So just to, what we've done is to give you a tip of the iceberg. This is just what I call a sneak preview into what is to come within the marketing strategy models that ExperientialNG will be launching very soon. So for many people who are on this session, and you have people out there who are interested in building their marketing capability, who are interested in building their marketing strategy capability, I mean, I strongly believe that moving forward, ExperientialNG, will have a lot to offer. And part of the models that will be coming up in the follow-up sessions will include deepening your understanding of marketing strategy, and again, key steps in developing one. We couldn't have done that in a 45-minute session. Gain better understanding of what it means to really think and lead strategically, and this is for marketing leaders who are in the room or leaders to be. Like I said, linking strategy to execution is very important. And of course, how to measure and evaluate, because again, you can develop your strategy and you can even take it to execution, but if you're not evaluating and measuring it, I mean, how would you know you're being successful? And of course, gain better understanding on how to drive marketing efficiency and marketing effectiveness, learning how to plan and prioritize. So these are some of the models or courses, that will be coming in the future within the 2021-2022 year from ExperientialNG. And in clear details, if I'm to go, there are basically two levels. The one for leaders, and that's basically leading strategically. And then for the managers who really want to build core strategic marketing skills. And I'm sure over time they will unveil these courses to you. And like many of us, we've enjoyed marketing as a profession. We're still marketeers, and I will tell you, every right thinking organization today, marketing is the core. Marketing is the hub of every organization. So marketing is like the brain box. That's the way I tend to look at it. And if you get the strategic thinking right, then I can tell you, both as a manager, both as a leader, and both as an organization, you'll be very successful. Thank you very much for listening. We'll now take questions. Over to you, Tunji.
Thank you very much, Austin. This is it's been really interesting going through this masterclass. Once more, thank you very much. I would like us to take questions, and I'm looking. Yeah, Austin, can you please stop sharing on your screen so that we can see the questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that.
Okay, yeah. So we'll take the questions that we have on the screen. We had said to everyone who is linked up to our sessions that you should please drop your questions in the box. Please drop your questions in the box. So Austin, let me start as I wait for one or two, which I'm sure would come through now. In this kind of world where we are, especially in our environment where government policies are changing every day, where you can hardly predict anything that would happen tomorrow, and you have this volatility in the market. How do you pitch short-termism against long-termism? How do you pitch both in terms of, you've said you need to have a strategy for 3 years to 5 years, but in an environment where you're struggling with the short-term pressure to deliver, how do you balance between the short-term and the long-term objective as a marketing manager, Austin?
Tunji, thank you very much. That's a very interesting one. And I'm going to use a practical example. So let's take one popular brand we all know, Coca-Cola. Okay? I mean, Coca-Cola is a global brand. Coke had been launched, Tunji, before both of us were born, I'm sure. So if, let's assume for argument's sake, we are 50 or 49 or whatever. So Coke has been there for as long as John Pemberton, basically try that experiment. Now, the question is, between then and then, a lot of things have changed. A lot has changed, at least in the last 10 years. But the strategy for Coke has remained the same. So what is the strategy? Those elements of a strategy don't change. What happens is, you can tweak them. So what is the strategy? Like I said, the first thing you do is you start with understanding your goal. So Coke today tells you want to refresh millions in the world. If I want to refresh 1 billion a day. So you can imagine that kind of audacious goal, meaning 1 billion people in the world will drink ice cold Coca-Cola at 2 degrees centigrade. So that is a clear goal. So how are you going to get that strategy done? Tunji, you have to produce, you have to ship, you need distributors, you have to sell it at a price that is right. Ultimately, Corona or no Corona, okay? Let's use even the Corona, which all of us are which is for recency. Did the Coke strategy change? No. Did the elements of the strategy change? Possibly yes. So Tunji, just to answer your question in clear terms, the strategy, which is the long-term activities, the big activities don't change. What could change could be short task that you can tweak over time. So do we rather sell online or sell offline for the interim period? Or do we hold on to our promotion for 6 months and then launch it back when the Corona is over and all that kind of stuff? So I'm saying that it is very possible to have your long-term strategy because it shows you the direction. It helps you map out resources. It helps you plan better. But when there are some, what I call short-term hitches, you can also have some short-term tactical tweaks, which eventually, but still in line with the bigger goal. It doesn't deviate from the bigger goal. It only helps you meander through the challenges of that short-term challenge, and then you continue with your strategy and plan the way it is. And by the way, no plan remains same for life. So what you do, even though you have a strategy, on a yearly basis, we do what we call the annual plan. We sort of reviews the strategy again and reviews your long-term goals to say, how are we doing? Are we getting this right? Are we not getting this right? And you can change things slightly here and there. I hope I answered that pretty well.
Brilliantly. You answered it very brilliantly. I'm still looking out for questions from the audience. I'm waiting for any of the questions. But again, while we wait, Austin, if you left it to me, I'll ask you 100 questions this morning. But I want to take your experience to look at the homegrown brands, Nigerian brands. And I want you to speak to maybe just one case study. You gave a very good example of the Ubers of this world and the rest of them. And you spoke about a few Nigerian brands. Can you speak about one Nigerian brand that you've been impressed with in terms of strategic thinking over the years, consistent strategic thinking over the years?
Clearly, I'll look at the Glow brand. Tunji, if you remember very well, Globacom came in as a distant third in terms of GSM. They had initial challenges. MTN and Vodacom then had launched, and Glow actually came slightly much later. But when they came in, they were very clear in terms of their target markets. They were so clear. So one of the few things they did was, they were quite strong in terms of how they connected with the average Nigerian. So again, I mean, that's sort of in terms of their marketing strategy, which I want to, so in terms of their business strategy, I think it was quite strong. It was all encompassing. Their business strategy was to make every single person in Nigeria afford a mobile phone. And that is why they went to the per second billing, which the two other telecoms refused to do at the initial stage. And that sort of dropped the pricing, that sort of dropped the cost, and that increased. I mean, the survey might not be there, but I'm sure if you check back, you will see that sort of increased, the penetration. It increased the call log and everything. Just within the 1 month they launched, they changed the game. I mean, so you can imagine Glo, they had a strategy. Even when you look at the consistency in their communication, again, they have connected with the Nigerian culture, which every other organization knows. So if you look at their insights, I mean, they connect with the Nigerian culture. If you look at how, in terms of connection with the consumer, they've also leveraged on very strong connection moments, like using Nigerian celebrities that a lot of Nigerians love to engage with. A lot of Nigerians love to follow. So I would say Glo, to a large extent, it's one brand that I think their strategic thinking process. If you look at their ad, 10 years ago and their ad today, you will see one thread running through it. One thread. It's so connected. It has the same theme. It almost has the same story, and it leverages the whole brand essence of Glo. So I would say Glo, to a large extent, it's one brand that has done so well from a strategic thinking process, at least in dealing with the market.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Austin. I think we'll stop here. And I'm very glad that you've also told us that there will be other courses which you'll be taking on the Experiential NG Marketing Academy platform. So we look forward to those courses and those programs. And also, I'd like to say to the audience that if you still have any questions that you want to put through, you can still drop them in the box, and we'll find time to take them before the end of this session. Thank you very much, Austin. Thank you. As usual, very, very stimulating. Thank you. So I'll go straight to the next agenda, the next program on our agenda, and that is a presentation of the first set of certificates. So in the studio where we are today, we have an audience. And the background to this is that the Experiential NG Marketing Academy has actually taken a few courses over the last year or thereabout. And one of the objectives is to display students who have put in a stellar performance in terms of the work they've done on the academy programs. So we're going to be awarding or presenting some of the certificates in this session as we go on. But I'd like to start with two special certificates, and these ones are the distinctions. The two people who scored distinctions, first is in the certificate in event and experiential marketing program, and the second one is also in the same program, the certificate in event and experiential marketing. Both of them have distinctions. I'd like to call on Ezine Okonlawa to please come forward. If Ezine is here, let's put our hands together for Ezine. Ezine has scored a distinction. This is a very, yes, I think here, Ezine, we're very proud of you and we say congratulations. You can take off your mask. We're safely distanced from, yes. Let's put our hands together for Ezine once more. The second distinction is going to Ifunaya Olisemeka. Ifunaya Olisemeka, I hope you're here this morning. Okay, I'm not sure he's here. I hope you will join us before the end of the session today. So that is the first set of presentations. We will go straight to the next session, which is going to be taken by Stuart Hamilton. So Stuart, I hand over to you right away.
Good morning. Thank you, Rotimi, for this opportunity to speak to your group, and thoroughly enjoyed the last presentation. I'm going to be taking about 40 minutes, 45 minutes to speak about leadership and management, and I'm just going to share my screen, so I hope that this works well. I think I need to be made a host, am I right? Should be able to do that now. I'll try this, see if it works. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great, that's fine. Thank you very much then. So I will just start from the beginning. Here we go. Great, good. Well, Rotimi has asked me to speak to you today about practical commercial leadership and management. So a little bit about me, not much. My name is Stuart Hamilton. I'm the director of Breakthrough Scotland Limited, which is based near Glasgow. I have been running this company for a number of years. It's a business consultancy which focuses on leadership and management training and input. One of my clients actually is the Scottish Chambers of Commerce. I don't work for them as an employee, but I'm contracted to them to head up their international trade division. And that has been a very interesting leadership and management experience for me, because 2 years ago, we had to set up a programme of international trade missions, which were being funded by the Scottish Government. So there was a great deal of leadership involved in that, in launching the programme and convincing the Scottish Government that they should fund it. And since then, since the programme started in 2019, I beg your pardon, we've had to manage it and make sure that the expectations of the chief executives of all the 30 chambers of commerce throughout Scotland are met, because they are the ones who take these missions. So there's quite a big management exercise in that. Now, the reason I mention that is because it's commonly the case when we have training companies that that's all they do. But I think it's very valuable to be able to deliver leadership and management training, but also be practicing it as well in a real environment at the same time. So it doesn't just become theory, and it becomes practice. So what we're going to be looking at today, in the short time that we have available, is an overview only of the practical commercial leadership programme, which is delivered on 3 levels. And I'll spend a bit more time looking at these later. But essentially, all I'm trying to do at this stage is it's a huge subject. It really is a huge subject. And I'm only trying to plant some thoughts in your mind that you may decide that you want to follow up on later on. So this is just very much a high-level overview of the 3 levels of modules that we deliver: the executive, the manager, and the leader. Now, leadership and management are not exactly the same thing. There are some similarities, but there are some traits that managers have that leaders don't have, and vice versa. But personal effectiveness that we see at the top there applies to everyone. So we would recommend, when looking at the programme, that everyone goes through the executive level at least, and then the managers and the leaders may split off into their individual areas as they see fit. But the emphasis on on this programme is practical, and I will explain how this came about later on in the presentation. So we all know that we're in a changing world these days, and the world has always changed. Business practices have always moved on, but particularly they've moved very quickly in the last year, mainly due to COVID. But there's more to it than that. And in many, for a long time now, online working has become more acceptable. We've been able to reach a wider world more easily with connectivity. But COVID has accelerated this. And we are now in a situation where across the globe, people are working in teams, but remotely from each other as a matter of norm, really. And even the experience we have at Scottish Chambers of Commerce is that all our trade missions now are delivered online, but they still have to be delivered to the same standards and the same expectations, because the Scottish Government is funding these and expects us to deliver them properly. So the fact that things are happening online does not mean that they're of lower quality at all. Now, change is good, and we can't stop it anyway. But the problem is that it brings risks to those who do not adapt quickly enough and will fall behind. And some companies will fail as things move on. And some companies, some very large companies in the UK here have failed already, household names that no longer exist. Why is that the case? Well, there are a number of reasons, but quite often it can be down to poor management. It can be complacency on the part of the managers or the directors, and it can be resistance to change, because not everybody likes change. People like things to be the same as they always were, the way that they have always understood it. But poor management, and bullet point number 4, lack of true leadership, really causes employee disengagement. It means that good people decide that perhaps this job is not for them anymore. And if you see in the bottom here, the source is AON Hewitt study. They carried out a study recently across 155 countries and 7 million people. So this is a very, very extensive survey indeed. And the one point to take away from this really is that you can see that the sector for highly engaged, top left, is only 22%, just over 1 in 5 people who are actually highly engaged with the company that they work for. And that's very disappointing indeed, because even if you add it to the moderately engaged, it leaves a huge number of people who are don't care one way or the other really, or are actively disengaged, even worse, actively disengaged people who are not buying into the company at all and would prefer to leave. And that is a failure of management, that this is allowed to happen. If only 1 in 5 of your workforce is highly engaged, then you're in a bad situation. But employers don't tend to see that. Employers tend to believe that their staff leave because they want more money. And in fact, that's not the case. The same survey that we just looked at, it showed that only 12% of people actually leave because the money isn't good enough. The real reason that they leave is they don't have that basic motivation in them. They don't feel that they bought into the company. They don't feel that they're valued, and they think they could be better off somewhere else. So again, this is the responsibility of leaders and managers to address this. Now, I want to tell you a short story here, just to illustrate. I like stories to try and illustrate things. If you just imagine for a minute that there were some scientists that wanted to experiment in behavior. So they got 5 monkeys in a nature reserve, and these monkeys have collars on them that can deliver a very mild electric shock. It won't hurt them, but it's not, they don't like it. And the monkeys are fed every day with 2 baskets of food. There's a green basket and there's a red basket. And every time the monkeys go towards the red basket, they all get a mild electric shock. And even if only one of the monkeys goes towards that basket, they all get a mild electric shock. So of course, monkeys are intelligent, so they learn over time that they should really just go and eat from the green basket and leave the red basket alone. But what happens is, if one of them forgets and goes towards the red basket, the other monkeys know they're going to get an electric shock, so they will pull him away, attack him, or drag him off. So over time, what happens is they all learn to eat out of the green basket. Then they take one of the monkeys away and they introduce a new monkey into the group, which doesn't have a collar on him. So this new monkey is completely oblivious to the fact that he should only eat out of the green basket. So when he goes to the red basket, the monkeys drag him off, or they attack him, and so on. And over time, he learns, or she learns, if it's a female monkey, that they should not be eating out of the red basket. And this goes on. So one by one, they take out the monkeys with a collar, and they bring in a new monkey without a collar. And the new monkey without the collar learns very quickly, because other monkeys make it learn very quickly, that it should only ever eat out the green basket. And eventually you get to the stage where the last monkey comes in, and the last monkey that has a collar leaves the cage. A new monkey comes in, and it also gets forced into the same situation. But none of these monkeys, none of them have got a collar on them. None of them will ever get an electric shock. None of them have ever had an electric shock, but they have learned to eat out of the green basket, because the minute they were introduced to the nature reserve, that's the way that it was, and they got pulled up or attacked for doing anything differently. And that is applicable, I think, to a lot of companies. We bring people in, we expect them to conform to the way that we work. We don't give them any opportunities to grow or ask questions. They learn the job, but they learn it the way that it's always been done, and it might not be the best way of doing it. And so if we really want to progress, we have to allow people to question, and we have to question our own practices and procedures, even if we've been doing them for years. Why do we do it this way? Is there a good reason for it? Or is it just the fact that that's the way it's always been done, so we won't change? And the companies that won't change will not succeed. Now, there are a number of ways that we can encourage people to develop more and come up with good ideas and so on. And one of these, one thing I also want to mention to you is something that's known as the Johari window. And the first time I heard of this, I thought it sounded like very mystical Eastern Johari, but in actual fact, it was invented by two US professors called Joe and Harry. So it's not that mystical at all. And what we're looking at here is we're imagining someone's abilities and capabilities, and we're looking down on a house with the roof removed. So this is the plan of the house, and it has 4 rooms. The outside walls of the house, which contains all the personality traits, the box if you like, are glass, so you can see in. But the internal walls are actually made of brick. They're solid, so you can't see through them. Now, when we're looking at ourselves, we imagine our own personality, we look at it from one perspective. But other people look at us through their experiences with us from another perspective. So what can they see? Well, when we're looking into the box and we look at our own personalities, we can see into box 1, and so can other people, because we can see through the glass, but we can't see through. So we can both see into box 1. That's our open self. That's the things that we know about ourselves and that other people see in us as well, and everybody's agreed in that. You could be outgoing, you'd be a nice friendly person, easygoing, that's the thing. You know that, other people know that. But other people will see things about you that you can't see because they're looking at it from a different perspective. These are the things that maybe the abilities that you have got that you don't recognize you could bring to the table. It might be sometimes it could be negative. It could be the way that you behave puts other people off. You don't see that, but they do. Not going to spend much time in box 3 because this is really aspects of your characteristics that nobody knows, and it's the kind of thing like, would you run into a burning building to save somebody? You don't know that until it happens, and neither does anyone else. But the box 4 is interesting because this is the box that only you can see and other people don't see. And this can often, for example, be a situation where people think that you're very confident and outgoing and you're very, very, very capable. But you yourself might know that you are nervous or that perhaps you don't like public speaking. Other people don't see that in you. Now, we can't do this today because we don't have time, but there are exercises that you can go through as a group where you can bring out the thoughts that you have yourself confidentially and that other people see in you. And the good thing that comes out of these exercises when we do them regularly is that people are surprised by box 2. They're surprised about the things that other people see in them that are good that they could bring to the table, and they haven't worked on it. They don't know that. But it's also good sometimes for other people, if this person is willing to share it, to see, to understand what the person themselves is concerned about or feels is drawing them back. And working together like that, it means that people can improve themselves and improve the team and benefit everyone. So we need to develop our interpersonal skills. We have to work together instead of against each other if we want to achieve more. I suppose we've all seen that acronym team together, everyone achieves more. But we have to do this in the modern world. It's more important than ever now, the way that we work, that we hone our interpersonal skills. So we need to know and understand what people's characteristics are like and how people would tend to behave. And so what I'm going to show you now over the next few slides is just an illustration of the different types of personalities, the different types of social styles that people tend to fall into. Now I'm going to be using 4 descriptions here: friend, actor, thinker, driver. These are not thought up by me. These are accepted across leadership and management training across the world. So when people talk about someone being a friend or green, trainers will know what they mean. I'm going to go through this now, so you'll get to see what I mean. But people do tend to fall into 4 types of social style for most of the time. Now, we can all move between them at different times in our lives and in different situations, but essentially, people will either fall into either a friend, which is the kind of amiable person, the one that relates to people, the one that is concerned about others. We all know these people that we work with who are good team players. We like being with them. They are friendly and helpful. Actors, or yellows, tend to be quite expressive and very socializing, and salespeople tend to be like this. So they're out there. They tend to express their emotions very easily, and they're not afraid to say what they think in a good sense. Thinkers, though, are the analytical people who, and I'm not trying to box people here, but if you imagine an accountant, for example, would expect to be a thinker and be analytical, otherwise they wouldn't be very good at their job. And a driver would tend to be someone who is a doer or a director, someone that gets things done, makes decisions. Now, the two at the top, the friend and the actor, they tend to be people orientated. So they're more interested in activities that involve working with people. Whereas the two down the bottom, thinker and driver, tend, but not always, but tend to be people who are task orientated. So they'll be more interested in getting the task done. And of course they could be interested in people, but it's the task that's driving them, not necessarily the engagement with people. People on the left, the amiable friend and the analytical thinker, tend to be slower in making decisions for different reasons, because the analytical person wants to test everything, but the friendly person sometimes can make it, sometimes can not be very focused on making decisions quickly, so they'll take their time around things. The actors, the sales type people, and the directors tend to want to get things done quickly. They're driving ahead. Now, if we don't understand in a team or even in our business negotiations who we are dealing with, what kind of social style that the person we're dealing with has, then we're likely to deal with them in the wrong way. So we may be asking an analytical person to make a quick decision, or we may be expecting a director to, to think about things for a long time. And if we don't approach them the right way, then we're not going to get the results that we're not going to get positive results from them. So the friendly people, the greens, they tend to be caring, sharing, patient, and relaxed. The outgoing actor people, sociable, expressive, persuasive, motivating. The thinkers are analytical, precise. They question things. They'll double check everything, as they should. And a director or a driver is usually determined, normally competitive and strong-willed, and would like to think of themselves as an achiever if indeed they are successful. But there are some downsides as well, not necessarily negative traits, but things that we need to be aware of, is that the friend people can sometimes be a bit, as I mentioned, disengaged and have no priorities. So they need to focus sometimes to make a decision. The outgoing people, the sales folk, can easily get bored, and they can be disruptive if they're not happy with the way things are going. They don't listen very well all the time. Once they've said what they've said, they have a tendency to stop, and they can be flamboyant, but sometimes not have a great deal of substance behind that. The problem in dealing with thinkers is sometimes that they can avoid decisions, and they can appear to be a bit reserved and cold. They're not really necessarily being like that. They are simply taking their time to make a correct decision, but it can be frustrating sometimes to deal with people who won't make a quick decision. And of course, directors and people like that, it can be demanding, controlling, aggressive, impatient, and dominant. So in terms of leadership and management, we need to be aware of these traits, and we need to be aware of the people that we're dealing with and interact with them accordingly. So what is the difference between a leader and a manager? Well, there are, as I said, there are common traits, but essentially a leader will instigate change, and the manager will try to maintain stability after that has happened. The leader tends to have a longer term vision, and the manager will have short to medium term objectives normally. A leader is more inclined to take risks because they're looking ahead at new ideas, and the manager's job is to reduce these risks once the courses of action start to take place. So a manager will follow what the leader is doing, but will try to reduce the risks as they're performing. Leaders tend to be driven by their heart, by what they think, and here I mean, what they feel, I should say, what they feel. Whereas managers tend to be driven by their head, so they'll make conscious decisions about things that are more thought out. And leaders tend to have to take people with them on the journey, but through their charisma, whereas managers take people with them through the authority that they have. So there is a difference. And some people are very good at both, but quite often you'll find people who are good leaders don't make good managers, and people who are good managers are not necessarily the best leaders. Now, there are a whole lot of building blocks here for building effective teams to work together. And I'm not going to go through them in any great detail. We don't have time for that. But I just want to mention that you need to have sound procedures in place for an effective team. You need to have openness, and confrontation doesn't necessarily, well, it doesn't mean conflict. It means being able to take on an issue and confront it. So it's not necessarily a negative thing at all or aggressive, but you need to be open and you need to be able to confront issues when they come up, not leave them. Communication skills are key, of course, both for written, verbal, and body language. Support and trust is essential for a good team, but that doesn't happen just by itself. It has to be earned. Trust has to be earned. Regular reviews need to take place. Clear objectives need to be set, and these need to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, or agreed, I should say, agreed, realistic, and with a time scale with them as well. So smart objectives that people understand what it is that is required of them and when. Within a team, you can have smaller groups, and we need to make sure that these groups work well together too, and they don't break off and do their own little thing. We need to engender cooperation, and then we do have to deal with conflict, which, as I may say, is different from confrontation. But conflict, yeah, it does happen, and it's got to be properly managed. Otherwise, it can break a team apart. Everyone needs to have the opportunity for individual development. Otherwise, they won't stay. They won't see what their future is. So it's vitally important for a manager to be looking at the individual development of their team members. We need to balance the roles. We need to think about the social styles. What kind of people have we got in a team? How do they work together? How do they interact? And of course, the manager or the leader themselves, the manager themselves has to have good management skills, or if it's a leader building a team below them, they need to have good leadership skills, effective skills. So in building a team, there are a number of stages. So first of all, there's the forming or the storming. This is like the brainstorming bit where the team is getting together. They don't know each other necessarily, probably don't know each other well enough necessarily. It was a new team to be able to work well. They take some time to get to the stage where they're performing normally as a team. Each one understands what the others can and can't do, and what's expected of them and what's expected of the others. We then progress to the point where that team performs well. It's delivering the results that are expected. It's an effective working team. We then move to the stage further on down the line where it's called the morning stage, where the team starts to naturally break up. It's done its job. People leave, people move on. So the team starts to break up, and that has to be dealt with properly so it doesn't just disintegrate overnight. And then we get back to the stage then of reforming a new team for a new challenge, and back round again to the new stage. So there is a stage to develop. There are these stages to developing a team, and you cannot get them in the wrong order. You have to follow them in that way. One of the other challenges that you will have when you're managing a team and managing meetings is the different types of people have different influences on the meetings that you have. And we know all these kind of people. I'm just going around very quickly. We have the know-it-all, the person that thinks that you can't tell them anything, and neither can anyone else. They've had loads of experience. There's usually someone who's negative, who's a complainer. There's the one who wants to drive the meeting, even though it's your meeting. They want to drive it for you and take it down their route, the dictator. And then on either side of at the bottom, you see the yes person and the no person. There's one who just agrees to everything. And there's one who says no to everything because that's in their nature to question and to sometimes be a little bit obstructive. At the bottom, you've got the agreeable person who doesn't really drive anything at all. And also on the left, the passive person. And the problem when you've got someone in a group or a team who is very good but is passive is that they will not bring their ideas forward because they're too scared to do so. So it's often worthwhile before any meetings take place that you identify who is going to be taking part in that meeting, how they are likely to behave, and to make sure that everyone contributes equally. And that could sometimes mean getting ideas from people before a meeting as to what they think, so that the passive person has the equal opportunity to have their ideas expressed, because you'll go around the table and ask everybody rather than waiting for the few that will stick up their hands and try and drive the meeting. So moving through some very high level stuff very quickly, I appreciate. When it comes then to building your team's international development up, I mean, we could spend a lot of time in this slide, I don't have it. You can either support people, or you can coach them, or you can direct them, or you can delegate them. And the way that you support someone will depend very much on their abilities and their motivation. That's the skill or the will. So if you're wanting to bring someone, improve someone's performance, and they're not performing just the way that you would want to them at the moment, is that because they don't have the skill to do the job, but they have the will, they would like to learn? So in that case, that person could be trained, they can be, or they could be coached to be brought up to a good level of working. If someone's lacking the will, though, that's a different problem, because they could be as intelligent and effective and have the opportunities to contribute, but they don't. So that person is going to need a different type of input to get them motivated to contribute, because they can do the job, they're just not doing it to the best of their ability. So when we're coaching, what does that mean? Well, it's the process of the manager helping someone through direct discussion and activity, working together to learn to solve a problem or do a task better than would otherwise be the case. So that's through practical help, it's through working together. And when you're coaching someone to come up and be more effective, eventually you want to get them to the stage where they can do that job themselves without that external input. But it does mean that you have to spend time with them and set clear objectives. Now, coaching and mentoring and indeed training sometimes get mixed up, but effectively, let's look at the differences between coaching and mentoring. You would coach someone who's normally would be a member of your staff, and it could be somebody that's the same level as you, or it could be you'd be coaching someone underneath you. Mentoring, though, is normally between an experienced person and someone who is up and coming. So it would be that someone who's got 20 years experience in a job, helping someone who's new in a job to think about what they want to do. The difference between coaching and mentoring is designed to help that person to reach their own decisions based on the information that you give them. So for coaching, the coach has something to gain or lose in the development of the individual, because they're part of that team and they contribute to the team, and the coach is also part of the team. So the coach has an interest in making sure that this person becomes successful, whereas the mentor has nothing directly to gain. Now, obviously, you wouldn't be mentoring somebody if you weren't interested in helping them, but there's no financial gain to be had, or no professional development for the mentor. They're doing it for the benefit solely of the mentee. Coaching tends to focus more on job skills, personal skills. Mentoring tends to focus more on long-term skills or life goals. What do you want? Where do you want to be in a few years' time? It's longer term. Coaching is often involved day to day, but the mentor is normally, when I say distant, I mean physically distant, in that they're not there day to day. They don't have day-to-day contact, but they will come back at regular agreed periods to assess how the mentee has been getting on, and to see if there's any further input that's required. Coaching is fairly fluid because it has to respond to day-to-day activities, and mentoring tends to be planned because it's longer term. So it doesn't tend to always respond to day-to-day activities, although you have to take experiences into account when you're moving along, but it's a longer term process, so it's more planned. Not going to spend time in this either. I just wanted to highlight this well-accepted GROW model for coaching, which starts out by saying that in order to coach someone to be able to be effective in their job, you have to establish clarity and clear goals and objectives for what you are going to do. You then move on to looking at the real life situation. What is happening at the moment? Why do they think the way they do think right now? What we might think about what effects do their actions or the activities have on the wider community, the wider group. Then we look at the options that they have for moving forward. What could they do in order to improve their performance? We commit to these actions. Moving down to the bottom now, we commit to these actions and they go and do it. And then we have this session which is called WILL, and it wasn't me that came up with this name, GROW. The W really just is there to fit, I think, to make it a good acronym. And it's the what will you do, and what have you learned, what will you do in future, what worked well for you, what will work better next time, and by the next time we meet, what will you have done? And then you're back to establishing new goals, and so it goes until the the person that you are coaching has become proficient in what you're trying to teach them. So, looking at delegation now, delegation is quite misunderstood sometimes, I think, in that the way that you should be looking at delegation is to look at what tasks are you doing just now that someone could do better than you, or at least as well as you. And if you're a manager or a leader and you're spending time and tasks that someone else could do better, or at least as well as you, why are you doing them? Perhaps you should be considering delegating to that individual. If someone can do it more cheaply than you can, or at a lower cost than you can, then if it's not a good, effective way of spending the company's money if you're doing something that someone else could do at better cost, at lower cost. Are you doing something, as we think back to the monkeys example again, that you're doing because you have always done it? Do you have to be the person that needs to do it? Things could change. And lastly, are you doing something that you shouldn't be doing? It's not really your responsibility. And especially, are you doing it because you like doing it? So if you find any of these apply, then you should be considering delegating the tasks to somebody else. But delegation isn't abdication. It's not a matter of just handing a task over and saying, get on with it, because you still have the accountability when you delegate a task to make sure that it's carried out properly and to see that the task is achieved. So the process for delegation is to identify the task that you want to delegate clearly, but it's also to identify the right person to carry out that task based on their skill, based on their will, based on the social styles that they have and their abilities. So get the right person for the right task. Set these SMART objectives, the specific, measurable, agreed. I'll come back to you in just a second. Realistic and time bound. Objectives have to be agreed, because if you set someone an objective that they don't think they can achieve and they don't agree with it, it won't happen. So they will not go away and do what you need them to do if they don't believe that they can. So before objectives are finally set, the person who's going to be carrying out the task has to agree that this is what's going to happen and that they can do it. You need to communicate the parameters, communicate these objectives, lay them down very clearly so that you can refer back to them and know whether they're being achieved or not. They need to be monitored at agreed levels. There is no point in delegating a task to someone and coming back 3 months later and saying, have you done it? You need to be checking as you're going along, 2 weeks down the line, 3 weeks down the line. How are you? What's your progress? Are you on target to achieve this task? And when it's completed, you would get feedback and provide feedback, I should say, to them as to how well that had been achieved and what they could learn and could do better next time. But hopefully, if you've been doing the monitoring as you're going along, that shouldn't be an onerous process, because the task should be completed satisfactorily, because it's not been left to the last minute to see whether or not it was a successful delegation or not. So I wanted to just give you one example in the short time we've got left about one particular study and one particular case for the Practical Commercial Leadership Programme, which is Billfinger. And in fact, Billfinger was the reason that this programme came about. Now, you may be familiar with them. They're a multinational oil company. They are involved with asset management, and they have an office in Aberdeen in the north of Scotland. Now, Billfinger was a client of mine, but they came to me a few years ago and said that they were aware of the fact that their teams on the rigs and onshore had become complacent. The oil and gas industry was in the fortunate position at that time for them that it was a bit of a cash cow. As long as companies were extracting oil, they didn't have to worry about costs too much. They were making huge profits. Even after the financial crisis, they were still making huge profits. And people who were in management positions in the oil companies were not really tasked with being particularly effective. They didn't have to be, because the companies made money anyway. But the Billfinger directors had the foresight to see that oil and gas was going to be facing harder times. And they wanted to show, well, first of all, they wanted their people to be better than average. But they also wanted to be able to show their clients that their people were better than average. And so they decided the best way to do that was to put these people, all of them, and some of them were very senior and had been around for many, many years, through a leadership and management program. Now, Initially, we designed the program for them, but we tailored it later on for the wider world. It was delivered as a 10-day course at that time, and it was so successful that we ended up running it 3 times a year for every year. And we would have 10 managers on the course each time. So we were training 30 managers and leaders per annum over a number of years. At the end, though, they got a certificate to say that they'd completed the course satisfactorily, and they only got it if they did. There was no handing out certificates just for completion. It had to be satisfactory completion. And it was amazing, actually, to see just how important that was to them. They all wanted their certificate. They all wanted to show their own managers, their line managers, that they had done well and what they had learned. But more importantly, Bill Finger went back with these skills and began to build better teams. They produced better results. They cut their costs, which meant they made higher profits. And the company had a very clear objective at that time when it launched this program, to extend its turnover internationally from 200 million to 800 million. And at the time that prior to COVID, they were 3/4 of the way there, which was within the target that they had. So a very successful program indeed, and it led to what we now have as the Practical Commercial Leadership Program. And the emphasis is on practical, because they didn't want a lot of theory that people would forget. They wanted practical examples, practical exercises, things that people would take away and remember. And so this is how we developed the Practical Commercial Leadership Program, and it's in 3 levels. The first is the executive, which, as I've said earlier on, really applies to everybody, and we'll see what the modules consist of in a moment. There are also management core skills, and there are leadership core skills. But the important thing is that the program can be tailored to suit the individual requirements of each business. So although there are core skills, there are many other modules as well that can be attached and added on if they're appropriate. So it's a tailored program, but it has a structure to it. In terms of the personal effectiveness, the core modules that we cover are communication skills, and we look at assertiveness. And we work with people so that they become assertive rather than aggressive or passive. We do carry out an introduction to public speaking, because most people would say that public speaking is one of their key fears. And in actual fact, a survey that was done a few years ago, and to be honest with me, I can't remember exactly who it was. I think public speaking came out as number 3 in people's fears in life, following death and serious illness. Even marriage and moving house and that's the thing was all lower down the scale than fear of public speaking. We look at time management, which is extremely important. We look at negotiation skills, which is not just for salespeople, it's for everybody in their day-to-day activities and their interactions with their colleagues and their managers. And we look at influencing skills, positive skills to help people to get their ideas across, and to influence clients as well, to come round to see what it is that they're trying to present to clients. Then we have the management core skills, which were coaching, which we addressed very briefly a few minutes ago. Team building as well. How do you build an effective team? Learning styles. How do people, and we haven't looked at this, but how do people in your team learn? Because people learn in different ways. We look then at informative public presentations. That's a step up from just normal public speaking. How do you deliver an informative presentation effectively to people in your team and to clients? We look at appraisals. What is an effective appraisal? Because appraisals that are carried out badly can be extremely damaging. And we do look at managing conflict. Again, a key area that people are very often not keen to address. But conflict exists and it has to be effectively managed. Now, from the leadership perspective, the core skills we tend to look at there are the different types of leadership styles, how to motivate people, because you can certainly bring people along with you because of your charisma, but that has to be maintained. So motivation is extremely important, but that also applies to managers. Delegation also applies to managers, but leaders have a particular tendency, because they know where they want to go, is to try and do too much themselves. And at some point, they have to delegate those responsibilities to people working for them so that the company can achieve what needs to be achieved. Then we look at persuasive public presentations, which are different from informative or just standard ones. How do you bring people around to your way of thinking when it's potentially a new idea that you need to bring people on board with. And we also look at critical thinking. Again, we haven't had the chance to look at that today. So that is the practical commercial leadership program. I know that I've touched on everything very briefly at speed because it was necessary to do so in the time. I had to finish at 11 o'clock. I'm not sure if you've got time for questions. I'll leave it up to you in the studio to say if whether or not, or Rotimi, if you want me to do that, and I'm happy to take them offline later on. But I do hope that that very speedy presentation did actually produce some thoughts for you that you might want to consider further. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Questions will come shortly. Just want to take a little video.
I see there are. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Tunji, we'll have you now.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thank you for that presentation. Yes, of course, you've seen one or two of the questions there. One of the questions that has been asked is to find out if the slides will be shared, and the answer is that the slides from the first and the second session will be shared by the Academy. I'd like to take any questions that we have for Stuart for that excellent and in-depth guide into leadership. Any questions, please? If you have any questions, as we said, I would like you to please note those questions on the chat.
I see there is one in the chat. How can I effectively coach a team member when oftentimes I work on a strict deadline? And that's a very interesting one, because although the idea of coaching someone to take over is obviously attractive and necessary, we still have to meet the requirements of our clients and our own managers, and sometimes we need to finish things ourselves. So what I would say with that is that is going to come back down to what it is you wanted to coach someone to do. So it may well be that you don't have time to coach someone to take over a task that you do completely, because the deadline doesn't allow it. So what in that case you'd be doing is breaking it down into smaller sections so that they would assist you with some of that work, and you may have to coach them over several different tasks or different deliveries that you have to make, because we work in the real world, and you have to be able to deliver what's expected of you. So sometimes that will mean doing some of the work yourself, but it's better to get people to work with you in that case, perhaps shadow you if they can, and set them some tasks to follow. But you wouldn't necessarily be able to expect them to produce the results that you want in too short a time frame. So I'm afraid the answer to that may be you may just have to break that down into smaller chunks and coach them over a series of different tasks.
Thank you very much, Stuart. If I may ask, how do you transit people from manager to leader? Because you find some people who are just eternally in that manager space and find it difficult to move to the leader space. How do you do that?
Yeah, you're right. In terms of leadership and management, quite often you'll find that the leader is the one who instigates everything in the first place, and then your managers get appointed afterwards to, to make sure that the process runs smoothly. But sometimes managers have to step up and look out, look outside the box, as the phrase, the time-honored phrase is, and start to do things differently. And that is where really we would be looking through the program and helping them to understand their own personal styles and the actions that they might need to consider in order to change the way that they work, change their way of thinking. And quite often that means being able to try things out that are uncomfortable at first. So it's not a quick process to just transform someone from being a manager who has a managerial style to instantly becoming a leader. But if that is required for the company to succeed, then these are attributes that they have to learn, and we would go through the program, would pinpoint the areas that they need to work on and give them practical exercises that they could carry out so that they would be able to adopt that mindset.
Thank you, Stuart. There's another question there. Yeah, for the
Well,
passive person, how do you encourage them to speak up? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this is a very good point, and I just alluded to it very briefly in terms of meetings. I would encourage people who are organising meetings where you've got someone who doesn't want to speak up, to ask people prior to the meeting to jot down a couple of points that they want to raise. So you give them a topic and say, what is your opinion on this? And at the meeting, I would be asking everybody to present their opinion just briefly. It means that the passive person will have to present their opinion and be given as much time as everyone else. Because if you just say to someone in a meeting, look, speak up, we haven't heard from you, that won't always go down well. Some people feel very, very awkward about being put in the spot, and they won't perform well if they are. They like to be passive. They're happy to listen to what everyone else has got to say. So the way to encourage them is, one is you could ask them directly, and I'd like to ask everybody in the room, in the group, what do they think about this? And you come to that person. Or you could, as I say, ask for questions or ideas before the meeting and then go over them during the meeting, which means that they have to address them. It's a bit like asking open and closed questions. If you ask someone a question they can say yes or no to, they'll just say yes or no. But if you ask them an open question like, why do you do something, or how do you do something, they have to speak. So it's a bit like that in the sense that you're giving them the responsibility, if you like, to speak to what they think, because they have put it down in writing previously. But I think one of the things we have to be aware of in meetings is somebody being overlooked, in which case the most direct way to approach that is just to simply go to them and say, I see that you haven't had the opportunity yet, to contribute. Is there anything you would like to add? It'd be as simple as that.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. So this question, I realize, is not a simple answer, and you mentioned it in the Bill Finger case study. How do you deal with complacency in leadership?
Yeah. Well, again, this is it's a common problem because a lot of managers and leaders don't realize that they're complacent. So again, during the program, we have a number of exercises that can be carried out where we look back on past activities and past achievements, and we ask people to set down their goals and objectives for the future, and then we look at we analyze them to see, is this really very innovative, or is this just more of the same? And if it's more of the same, where do you see yourself being in a year's time? Where's your company going to be? What are your competitors doing? So it's a wake-up call, actually, in many respects, for leaders to be self-analytical. And I mentioned the Johari window. We can use that in a way that encourages people to accept not the failings, but some shortcomings or things that they might need to address because they haven't recognized it in themselves. So it's a matter of effectively and practically working with people to get them to realize that they need to do something different. We're not telling them to do something different. They have to come to that realization through working with the program.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Yeah. Thank you. I think we'll move on from there. Thank you very much. Let's put our hands together for Stuart in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to progress very quickly to present another set of certificates. I'm sure some of the recipients are here. Now, the courses, as we said at the beginning, which we have run from the beginning of the past year, this is an opportunity to hand out the certificates to the participants. This one is the certificate in event and experiential marketing. I would like to call Mr. Adedayo Owolabi. Mr. Adedayo Owolabi, if he's here. Okay, we'll progress quickly. Okay, she's not here. Uday Victor Chigozie. Uday Victor Chigozie. Okay. Onyebuchi Johnson Opara. Onyebuchi, let's put our hands together for Onyebuchi. Florisho Jefter. Again, let's put our hands together. Sholaru Olumuyiwa Okpeyemi. Otene Ene Peace. Let's put our hands together for her, please. Ogunlano Olumide. No, right. Okay, all right. So the remaining certificates we will give after the next session. So I would like to invite the speaker for the next session, Dr. Rotimi Olaniyo.
Okay, thank you so much, Tunji. And let me just say congratulations to the recipients of our inaugural set of certificates. I think they all worked very hard. And I think also we should also not forget to thank the sponsoring agencies who had, even though through these difficult times, still found the resources to be able to put them through some level of work skill development. Thank you so much for your presentation, Stuart. I found that really very enjoyable, very thought-provoking, and I am hoping that our colleagues across both client and agency side of the divide of marketing service will take advantage of that wealth of experience that you've so generously shared, and ultimately are able to put in place the necessary investments to really build out their teams. Now, I also have, I guess, the next 45 minutes or so, I believe it is, to go through a couple of slides. I'm hoping that I can deliver it less than that. I am a teacher, so sometimes I think we just basically talk a lot. So I'm going to really try and make sure and hope that maybe I have a hard stop if I'm not even able to get through all the slides. But really, my job is made easy by the quality of the presentation that has been offered already by the two gentlemen. And my job really is just to hone in on a few of the points which they have made and kind of bring everything together. So I'm going to try and share my slides now, if you don't mind. And I will ask that you please just bear with me as I also then try to get the slides done. Just 1 second. So I need to share my screen as well. Okay. And hopefully, I don't know if I need technical support, but I am trying to share my screen. So does that mean I need to be made a co-host or? Okay, I shall try. All right, fine. So I take it that you can see the screen, the slides. Can I just get a confirmation, please?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Now, my job is to kind of speak to the issue of being a reflective marketing practitioner, and to build on a lot of the things which both Austin and Stuart have so eloquently delivered on, which is the need for leaders to be able to step forward, think strategically, and more importantly, to build learning organizations. I just very quickly would like to kind of give you a bit of a background in terms of who I am, for those who might not be familiar. Just a little bit about me. I currently have the privilege of serving as the publisher and the editor-in-chief, although not so much an editor-in-chief really, because we have our content editor in the person of Intia Sukuma present at the studios there. But it's my really responsibility to just kind of try and set a vision for what this platform hopefully is going to be able to achieve today, and more importantly, into the future. And I established that as being able to top grade the quality of an entire community of practice, not just micro players, but the entire industry of practice, by sharing the resources that we all need, which are, knowledge, content, intelligence, insights, and the rest. I am an entrepreneur, scholar, I think an advisor to commercial leaders to a large extent, who ultimately have big challenges of trying to make sure they transform the businesses as much as their business balance sheets. And I think that, well, I'm not working, I'm also a bit of a closet writer, or at least I think I am. I have 33 years of experience in marketing. I'm grateful to God for that. And I have had a very interesting stint across both the client side, the agency side, and currently on the academic side of the equation. So when I was kind of thinking about what I needed to say and kind of deliver on, I really also sat back as it is to reflect. And really what I was asking myself is, what is it that I have learned, if anything at all, in the last 33 years of my working life, which gratefully has all been in the area of marketing, commercial strategy, and the like. I think the first thing that I've learned is that leadership is extremely hard. It is not, you cannot, we see a lot of case studies or movies or stories that talk about the mythical great leader, that kind of almost romanticizes this idea of being a leader, and that it is really all about just having a magic button. But that's not true. If anything, I think what I have understood in the last couple of years, certainly, is that success, both at the personal level and at the corporate level, is never guaranteed. I think another thing that I've learned is that the most advanced individuals, and by that I really do mean the most advanced humans in any culture and in any nation or society for that matter, as much as the most advanced corporations, as well as the most advanced societies, are those who are always asking themselves very deeply reflective questions, but also it's not so much about the fact that they ask themselves these questions, but that they are able to show and demonstrate the humility which is required to deal with the truth of whatever those answers are. And that's a very, for me, that's a very profound statement that I perhaps even become, that has become even more relevant. And I have become a little bit more aware about over the last 3 years, where I have been also, in, if you will, kind of in a journey, a personal journey of reflection, stepping back to basically evaluate what it is that I have been doing over the last 3 decades. Interestingly, because of the work I do, which is basically as an academic and as a researcher, I've also come to realize that the richest man in the world today, for any, if that means anything, happens to also be the biggest learner and action researcher. And so he is an entrepreneur, and we will see that shortly. He is an entrepreneur. So I think he is obviously an entrepreneur. He's built this phenomenal machine called Amazon. So you get who I'm talking about, Jeff Bezos. But it will shock you or surprise you to realize that as successful as he has been, he has also been perhaps the one person in modern history, certainly in the last couple of years, in the last 25 years or 30 years that his business has been, that has spent perhaps one of the largest amounts of money learning and researching what works and what doesn't. I've also learned that organizations, teams, ecosystems, and indeed nations that thrive on constant experimentation end up being able to create the biggest innovation and value producing funnels. And if there is anything that we need to understand about what we do in the world of business, I don't think it is anything beyond that. The development, the creation, and the deployment of basically innovation and value producing funnels that ultimately creates value for all the stakeholders that a business or a commercial interest, or indeed a nation, ultimately has to serve. And then when I kind of bring this all together, I guess what I am saying is that I now find that marketing leaders fail, as indeed all leaders fail, when they stop learning how to think strategically, and that the most successful commercial leaders actually are also the ones who are best at creating an organization that is always learning. These are kind of, in a nutshell, for me, the distillation of what I think my experience be in my own personal life, as well as through the observation of so many other people who I admire and those perhaps who I do not so much admire. But taking all these lessons and then ultimately, I think, delivering on some form of a reflection. I have a video to play. I am hoping the technology does not fail me. So I will play it. I hope it works properly. If it doesn't, we will skip it, but I will, obviously, because the slides will be shared later on, you will still be able to watch it. So please, I would like a confirmation that the video plays, and more importantly, that you're able to hear what is being said. This obviously is Jeff Bezos, just to introduce the gentleman there, who is the founder of Amazon.com, which really in just less than a quarter of a century has become this phenomenal innovation and value creating engine that the world really cannot live without today. If there is anything perhaps that we now know about the COVID era, we realize how powerful the logistics side of living and life is. And he fundamentally has created this, as well as so many other things. So I will play this, and I hope you're able to hear.
One of my jobs as the leader of Amazon is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good, it's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But you really, it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. You need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are by their very nature prone to failure, but big successes, a few big successes compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, you know, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that, that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And, you know, you might remember pets.com or Cosmo, or, you know, give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they also, they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure, they eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are, you know, making bets all along, even, you know, big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do.
Yeah. So were we able to hear that and see that properly? Can I just get some quick confirmation? Okay.
Yes.
I find this very short clip one of the most powerful lessons for anybody who basically has the responsibility of leading people and managing balance sheets to the benefit of all stakeholders in a business. Because maybe for a certain reason, I think that over the years, I've come to realize that a lot of cultures actually punish failure. And therefore, what has happened over the years is that a lot of societies have come to a situation where our children are told you failed, our institutions fail and are punished for failing, our collective arrangements fail, teams dread failure so much that they do not step forward into into what you refer to as risky environments, bold, courageous actions, which are able to take, you know, both individuals, teams, organizations, and indeed nations forward. The most successful people in the world are people who were not afraid to fail. But actually, it's not just that they were not afraid to fail, but they did fail. It is what they did with failure that I think becomes the most important. And for me, this has become a lesson which, even though I probably knew about this several years ago, you know, in terms of the surface level, it is being faced with a lot of challenges, personal failures as well, quite honestly, and reflecting on that and then kind of looking at the world. And I come to realize that, wait a minute, there's a process here which ultimately we must all go through, most particularly leaders. And that process is what is referred to, quite honestly, as the process of reflection. What is reflection? What does it mean to be a reflective individual? What does it mean to be a reflective leader? And indeed, what does it mean to be a reflective team? And I've got quite a lot here, which are appropriately cited, because they're not my words, nor my ideas. It is just me bringing this all together. So we've got Borden et al., who say to us the practice that reflection at the individual level is the periodical stepping back so that you can ponder the meaning of what has recently happened to you and to others in your immediate environment. Stepping back to reflect means to step back to ask yourself, what just happened? Why did it happen? Okay. As a group, reflection is the extent to which the group members themselves actually overtly reflect as well as communicate about the group's objectives, the strategies that they have deployed, and the processes, and adapting these to the current situation or any anticipated circumstance into the future. Now, across these two definitions, which are not too very far apart from each other, is the fact that they sit on a bedrock of certain processes, if you will, or certain actions. And what Kemba et al. In 2000 offer us are the solutions to this, really. There are four kind of things in their view that reflection needs to sit on. First and foremost is what's referred to as the habitual action, the fact that their activities are conducted automatically or with minimum conscious thought, You're going through the motion, not realizing and not thinking about it. And therefore, for that reason, if you do not step back, you just go through habitual action. But then there's that need for the comprehension of the concept without reflecting upon it, understanding. In other words, trying to go through that with a view to ultimately being able to find out what its significance is in terms of both personal or practical situations. And then we come to the heart of it, which is this notion of reflection, which is ultimately this internal examination on an ongoing basis, as well as the exploration of the issues that concern us and that trigger a sense of discomfort. That's every human being actually has reflection. The moment you have an experience, and we'll come to a little bit more of that. But what is important and what apparently great leaders need to do is that they must therefore go on to a level of intense reflection, a high level of reflective thinking through which they're able to then ultimately bring about transformation for themselves, for their teams, and for their organizations. And so this is something which perhaps, and I will say this as someone who has worked in Nigeria, tried to build a business in Nigeria, it's a very difficult environment to step away from to reflect. Not because we don't have the spaces, both mental and physical, to do that, but because the nature of the way in which we've lived our lives does not allow us, or has not allowed us, quite honestly, to be able to do this in a proper, systematic, and hybrid fashion. Reflection, if we're to take it a little bit deeper, is that one thing that the leader ultimately has such a very powerful influence on. Indeed, one key situational factor that will enhance the way reflection and reflexivity in a team happens is purely down to the leadership. Edmondson in 2003 did some work, and they argue that reflection is an essential part of what the team learning process is, and that a leader's behaviors will ultimately influence the way in which the reflective practice of a team is put in place. In fact, some studies have reported that there is a positive correlation between the level, type, and quality of team leadership and a team's reflexivity. So they found out that there are certain types of leadership styles, obviously, that is associated with team reflexivity. And there are some which ultimately take away from a team being able to reflect appropriately. So why is it, therefore, that it needs to work that way? On the one hand, the reality of the situation is that all leaders are called to transformation. In other words, as if I were to use the phrase that Austin offers, game changing, game changers. Transformational leadership facilitates that development of the creative problem-solving capacities that all employees should have. And it does that because it shapes the environment within which the employers or the employees, I beg your pardon, have to behave and demonstrate themselves in a certain conducive way. It means that there is something to be done in creating a learning environment if you are a leader. There is something which you have to make sure you're consciously working on. Learning is actually, to define it clearly, is conceptualized as the way in which individuals or groups acquire, interpret, reorganize, change, or assimilate different types of information, insights, intelligence, skills, and their feelings through deep reflection. But there are two different aspects of learning that we must be clear about. On the one hand, there is what we refer to as the learning process, which is the ongoing process of reflection and action. And normally it is characterized by the way in which questions are asked, how we seek feedback from each other, how we experiment. Remember, that's a very important word. How we reflect on the results which we have been given, and how we discuss failure or indeed unexpected outcomes. So there is learning process on the one hand. On the other, we have the adaptation to change, which is outcomes. Now, one of the very interesting things is that managers focus on learning outcomes, failing to realize that perhaps more work needs to be done actually in the learning process. So what I now understand is that, yes, indeed, learning outcomes, which are the adaptations to change, this greater notion of understanding about our improving performance in teams so that we can ultimately at the next quarter, when we do the reviews, be able to stand up and get applauses from the CMO or from the head of marketing or from the CEO for that matter, that we focus on as leaders in marketing. While we fail to realize that the process in itself, the way in which we ask questions, the way in which we allow ourselves to seek feedback, the way in which we put together experimentation, and the way in which we allow failure to be discussed or otherwise is equally as crucial. Now, there are many reflective models that a practitioner, a professional can use and take on board. And I will be the first to confess to you that I did not come to the understanding of reflection until my mid-40s, which is a shame, I would imagine, to me. But thank God it's not too late. And I then started to understand why a lot of times we have problems in teams, and why, to be sincere with you, culturally, we also have problems in being able to move societies forward, teams and venture teams forward in the way in which we should, because we have failed to actually systematize and acquire systematic approaches to the way in which we reflect. Now, organizations might do this, to be sincere with you, but they do it with a respect with a certain outcome. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, this we can spend literally 2 weeks looking at each of these models and working across them. I have been doing that now for about 2 years and trying to adapt them into a marketing or commercial environment and understanding what this means. But several reflective models exist for the practitioner to use. The thing about it, which we must be careful about, which is that you cannot just go on and use them because they require added on prisms, and they require certain types of relationships, which might be referred to as critical friendships, to enable that reflect or optimize the experience. One of the things that I have been very privileged to do over the last 30 years, or at least 20 years plus in the service industry when I was in agencies, is working with marketing directors, heads of marketing, sales directors, and basically being their partners in the thinking process. And what I then realized when I started to look at these models is to realize the fact that actually that is absolutely correct. My most successful relationships, in terms of me being an agency head who ultimately had to help a sales and marketing director, a CMO, or a head of marketing to achieve results, my most successful relationships were actually those where we were critical friends, where I was a critical friend to the head of marketing. In other words, not a rubber stamp, but where I had the courage to have a horizontal conversation, of course, which challenged the marketing director's thinking. And this is where there is a big problem in the agency world today, because a lot of our younger and middle-level executives have failed to be trained to understand that that is what their responsibility is. Even though the reality is that on the client side of the agenda, marketing leaders need to also start to train their marketing managers to understand that it is that critical friendship, that professional critical friendship that is required. And it's not a master-servant relationship. So to a large extent, part of the reasons why I'm passionate about what I'm doing now is because I think we can help ourselves. I think we can help the next generation of marketing service practitioners to step up their game in being true critical friends to brand managers, marketing managers, and heads of marketing, because they're equipped appropriately to be able to offer the value that great teams, learning organizations require. Why? Because the world is rapidly changing, and it's changing very fast. I'm not going to again spend too much time on this, but basically let me tell you what is going on, and I will underscore the point very soon. I'll underscore the point also very soon. The reality is, for instance, if you look at something just like computing and the movement towards what is referred to as singularity, humans do not realize it now, or might not realize it now, but humans need to step up the game, because a lot of things that humans could do, computing power exponentially moves us in the direction of not requiring humans to be able to do it anymore. It is envisaged or forecasted that by 2045, that computing power will surpass the brain power equivalent to that of all humans combined, human brains combined. 2045, which therefore means that in the ecosystem, we must understand that we're also in an ecosystem with technology, that in today's ecosystem, therefore, what role then would humans play? How then ultimately, right now, the truth of the matter is algorithms are actually ruling a lot of the decisions, particularly in the West, and it's fast approaching also in other parts of the world. Artificial intelligence is made it such that algorithms and AI is now making key decisions, which ultimately or previously were made by human beings. So the basis for achieving distinctiveness, the basis for achieving sustainable strategic advantage as a business or as an individual, or indeed even as a nation, is shifting to what is now being referred to as dynamic intellectual capabilities. It is not about just scale or who has massive populations. That is the biggest error that people make. That might give you consumption if you've already got per capita GDP at the right levels, but true competitiveness, strategic advantage into the future, distinctiveness ultimately is about dynamic intellectual capabilities. Now, you might ask, what is that? But I'm coming to that. But before I say that, let me even go further. The truth also is that today, life and death of societies, of humans, is also now going to be determined by the issue of distinctive, sustainable, competitiveness or intellectual dynamic capabilities. What do I mean? Look at what's going on with COVID, and look at what's going on with vaccines. Only a certain number of countries today were able to rapidly put together the necessary wherewithal, not to produce the vaccines, but to actually do the intellectual work to create a vaccine that has a chance, a high level of efficacy of anything between, as you can very well see, AstraZeneca's 62 to 90%, or Moderna's 95%, or Pfizer's 95%, or Sputnik 5, which is the Russian vaccine, at 92%. To get it to that level of efficacy and effectiveness at the shortest possible time to save human lives. To do that, what all these societies that have been able to achieve these vaccines have done is that they have tapped into the dynamic intellectual capabilities of their societies. If you do not have it going forward, it's not just about competitive advantage anymore. The way we're now realizing it, it is also about life and death. The fact that some countries have been able to start vaccination and take them to high numbers, and some are still waiting for those who have surpluses to give them the opportunity, is in many ways speaking to the reality of what it means to compete going forward. And that thing that we see happening in the world with respect to vaccines is happening also, and will happen also with respect to the way companies, teams, particularly marketing teams, ultimately have to play. Why? Because the game, which is called dynamic intellectual capability, is about learning, is all about who knows how to learn fast. At the heart of dynamic intellectual capability going forward is what is referred to as fast learning. See how fast we were able, certain societies, certain companies were able to pull out vaccines and execute what was necessary to commercialize or optimize or commercialize those ideas. That's exactly what we're talking about. The world has really changed, and this will start to become the new dynamic. So now more than ever in human history, the truth is that now more than ever in human history, individuals, teams, corporations, nations have to change the way they learn. And what this means for marketing and commercial leaders is that this new approach has to encompass what you might refer to as experiential learning, which is deployed across a range of foundational marketing functions, both in terms of the way in which we put in place learning processes for our marketing teams and the way in which we look out for the learning outcomes. Now, there is a lot to be done just thinking about this point. There's a lot to be said just thinking about this. So the way in which marketing teams learn has to change quickly. And here, what I have, can I just very quickly, if you don't mind, I normally stop and pause to get some verbal feedback. Is this clear? I hope I'm not on a lone walk. Am I still connected?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. All right, just to make sure, because sometimes, I mean, I've had the experience of talking for about 30 minutes, only to find out I was cut off 30 minutes earlier. So once beaten, twice shy. Now, here you've got a slide that kind of connects with that conversation point I made about the way marketing teams learn has to change. To start off with, the pedagogical approach that we ultimately have used to train brand managers, marketing managers, account managers, account executives, and so on and so forth, has been very traditional. And it's been kind of literally almost the same. But thinking, what is a pedagogy? It is the philosophy of the way in which they should learn. It is the philosophy of ultimately what it is that learning and knowledge and truth is. What does it really mean today when we talk about segmentation? What does it truly mean today when we're talking about this concept of strategic competitive advantage? Is that really, in fact, in itself, the key thing that we should be going after? Marketing sits on some very, particularly if you're in fast-moving consumer good marketing, it sits on some very, very fundamental, very conventional approaches over the years. Yes, digital marketing has changed and is changing some of that, but we still see some of those traditional factors there. The way in which learning systems are developed is to sit down in a classroom. Look at what's going on today. I mean, everybody, just less than 2 years, and everybody now realizes that, wait a minute, we can do this thing virtually. And probably it makes more sense. So all sorts of learning systems are actually being developed. And therefore, what is your marketing team doing in building those systems? The way in which interdisciplinary or network learning, what does that mean? Are you thinking about learning from just marketing standpoint, your corporation standpoint, or actually doing joint learning to a certain degree, even with your competitor? Why? Because there are certain areas where the points of parity actually gives both of you, to a certain degree, some level of collaborative advantages. Now, that's not the right kind of thinking that most marketing managers have met. You don't even want to sit down in the same room with your competitor. Okay, how do we learn? Learning fast now means that we need to learn agile, learning agility. We have to actually learn leanly and not spend resources that we don't have. So what does it mean to put together lean learning for teams? Strategic thinking, we've talked about that. Facilitative and reflective leadership. And I'm so pleased and so grateful for the generosity that Stuart has offered in really probing some of the ways in which leadership really should be establishing itself. Ultimately, one of the most important things certainly happening today across business generally is this conversation around transformation. And therefore, to a large extent, equally, the truth is that what are you doing in terms of also transforming your leadership learning systems? In terms of outcomes, as you can see, there are a lot of things we should be thinking about as well. Environmental sensing, the way we sense the environment. Who would have told us 2 years ago that COVID would have done so much damage to the world, to businesses? I mean, here in the UK, if with all the shock absorbers that this country has here in the UK, where I'm presently seated, so many businesses have suffered immense loss. A lot of value has been wiped away. because of something which nobody saw coming. What more of societies that do not have these types of institutional infrastructures that developed countries like the UK or the US have? Look at the US, even battling and struggling in itself. The way in which we segment, the way we put in segmentation is changing, because one segment is no longer constant, and ultimately you can no longer hold a segmentation variable or moniker or as constant, because the human being is changing its segmentation on an ongoing basis based on the reality of the dynamic life we live. So how do we start to think about that? Hyper-personalization. I mean, I just loved what Jeff Bezos said about experimentation. It really hit me hard when he said that, about the nature. This is the nature of the man. He's not thinking of himself as a businessman. He actually thinks of himself as a scientist who is constantly experimenting. The way in which we look at what we refer to as communicative syntaxes. What are syntaxes? The language, the choice of words, the constructions of sentences. It's changing because of the nature of the devices, the nature of the channels we have to use. Algorithms today are ruling us. Fridges are making decisions on what should be stocked. And the woman who ultimately is the mother of the home really doesn't have that much power, so like sometimes anymore in certain societies, because Alexa does the rest of the work and immediately triggers an order. And whether we think, oh, this is so far Western, it's coming to all parts of the world. It's coming. I mean, Amazon is just setting up his regional office in South Africa. That tells you what is coming. Or, modeling and canvases. Marketing econometrics, which is about really being able to deliver. One of the biggest issues which I've had is that from an experiential standpoint is nobody truly in the experiential marketing community, for instance, can claim to truly have a proper way of campaign monitoring and evaluation. And so some of us have been working on that for the last 2.5 years, so that we can deliver a certain level of truth, to marketing campaign management and ultimately use that. But above all, I think one of the most important outcomes that needs to change is courage. And that speaks to the issue of what we call competency frameworks. Who currently has competency frameworks for the recruitment and the development of marketing teams, both at the client side and the agency side? And so a lot of, in Birmingham University in Birmingham, they've been doing a lot of work on this notion of courage and marketing. And how do we even know who is the right kind of person, courageous enough to and bold enough to take decisions going forward? My time is running out, but I'm hopefully gradually coming to an end. Ultimately, the creation of a learning organization, as Peter Senge is perhaps the person who started this whole game. He says that it is where a learning organization is where people constantly and continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, where new expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, where collective aspiration is set free, and where people are constantly learning how to learn. And that should be the goal of anybody who leads a marketing team. So how do you then build a marketing learning organization? A marketing learning organization has to develop a high level of dynamic intellectual capability by connecting all the relevant value creation, value delivery, and value capture network partners in the service of a customer who collaborates with us to teach us how to serve them. And that means that there is work to be done across brand teams, sales teams, agency partners, customers themselves, and other internal as well as external stakeholders, all in the service, ultimately, of creating value for all stakeholders. And what you have there are a range of very important issues that you need to be aware of, and you need to start to make a plan towards. If today, for instance, you are responsible for building top-notch marketing teams, you need to be putting in place audits, competency, as well as capability mappings. You need to really ask pedagogical questions, as well as start the development of organizational curriculum for your teams. You need to be doing learner journey mapping. You need to be putting in place experiential learning, as well as channel development. You need to have a point of view with respect to EdTech, digital learning solutions provisions. How are we going to put in place content And that means content planning, development, and deployment. How do we put in place personalization? And how do you build a learner relationship management system that ultimately keeps you at the top end of the relationship or the learning relationship with your audience or with your employees? And finally, how do you put in place the necessary periodic reviews and management controls to make all this happen? I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that to achieve that, you need to think about whether you are a future-proof leader across 5 very important parameters that have been, through research, is shown clearly is required to be a future-proof leader that is able to do this. And I will leave this later on so that you can kind of use these questions to reflect individually. What is the level of your learning agility? What's the level of your focused attention as an individual and as a team? What is the level of your lateral thinking as an individual, as a team? What is the level of the radical interdependence that you live by as an individual and as a team? And what's the systems thinking for you as an individual as well as you as a team? We want to help at ExperientialNG, and I am so grateful to have the quality of minds as well as experience who've stepped forward to and agree to be counted in offering the Nigerian marketing industry, particularly those in the marketing community and the service and allied community, some degree of support in this journey. And the way what we've done is we want to put together a battle on the strategic marketing leadership development accelerator. It is a program, but it is designed more like acceleration, in the same way as new ventures and new organizations ultimately, or new companies form out themselves. Because in many ways, this is what it is. You're building dynamic intellectual capability, and therefore you need to move quickly to do that without a fuss. So this sits on 3 legs. One is the practical leadership, commercial leadership program. The second is this strategic marketing program or thinking program. And the third is this more work to be done in this whole area of how do you help you build a marketing-led organization or a marketing team learning organization. So this issue of reflective practice and the experiential learning organization. Now, as you can see, I'm grateful to Stuart Hamilton, who is the director of Breakthrough Scotland and a man of immense experience, and who, by the way, I've known for about 20 years. We were surprised when we kind of realized that, it's 20 years ago we started our conversation, and who is someone who I'm really grateful for support and for the conversations over the years. And Stuart is an excellent resource person and is so passionate about this, helping to build, help teams break through and help small and medium organizations as well as large organizations actually break through. And so here you've got the range of models which he kind of offered in terms of his program, and he course directs that, and we work with him on that. Austin Ofomba, who is also was very generous with his time and his experience and his passion for strategic thinking. And again, in making the choice, I will confess, I thought hard about this and wanted to go with people who, over the years, I knew that there's a level of passion and of course commitment to the exploration of this agenda. Austin, I've worked with as a critical friend. And this is maybe one of the most important issues. The conversation really that good marketing directors should have with heads of agencies should be about critical friendships, probing, questioning, debating, arguing, and sometimes even fighting, all in the service of the brand. Other things can follow later. And that has been the relationship that I've had. And I had great privilege to work with him over the years in some very, very outstanding projects. But more importantly, I understand the quality of his thinking in terms, and indeed the two companies that he worked for at that level clearly also did. So he offers us that. And then finally, as I said, I come in to support in the area of helping managers here, marketing managers, heads of marketing who are ready to embed all this. A lot of the work here is kind of, in this part of it, is a bit more consulting type, more bespoke. I'll give you a case in point. have we thought about developing customer education programs? You need to be training your customer as well. And now that typically is done in IT companies with things like the customer success manager, white papers, training programs or user training and so on and so forth. And by the way, just to say, I just reminded myself, Stuart, you and I did that almost 20 years ago, basically working through training, IT platforms and so on and so forth. Action research that helps you to improve your marketing process is part of what needs to be done if you truly want to be an experiential learning, experiential marketing learning organization. There are other things as well, such as competency frameworks and capability mapping. I will say this point blank because I used to be the vice president of the National Institute of Marketing of Nigeria. The Nigerian marketing industry, for raw and profession, for all the years that we have done great work, does not have a universal competency framework. And I will be the first to say it's a disgrace to us, me inclusive. And it is way overdue. And how do you then put together learning journeys if you don't, for instance, have competency frameworks that we want to use as an industry? Because competency frameworks need to also be culturally aligned to the nation in question. For one thing, trade marketing in the United Kingdom is not the same way you do trade marketing in Nigeria. So you cannot take a UK model and just ram it through the mouths or the throats of people. We have to do the work. And so some of us are trying to make the commitment to do these types of things in the service of our industry and in the service of our profession. But we need help. We cannot do this if we do not get the support of people on the client side, as always. Those who are truly driven to a higher level of what the practice can be. And so what we offer is this in terms of a startup, the Strategic Marketing Leadership Development Accelerator in association with Breakthrough Scotland Leadership Education. I'm grateful for Stuart's approval and agreement to do this. And in a nutshell, this is what the promissory note is by way of a value proposition. It's 90 days worth of training. It is online, it is self-paced, but it is experiential executive learning, 18 modules in all, 12 premium case studies, international coaching over Zoom, business simulation games, all made available particularly for leaders in marketing today, in both the client and agency side, but more importantly, for leaders in training. In other words, you developing the next set of people who ultimately will take your business and your brands and your value propositions to the next level. So this is in a nutshell where we are hoping to go. I'm more than happy to basically answer any questions if they are so. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you. So I guess it's over to the hybrid studios, Tunji?
Yes, we're back to the studio.
I need to stop sharing, I believe.
Yes, you need to stop sharing this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. Really grateful for that. Again, some of the questions on the chat are asking that we should please send the deck, the decks through after the session. So I believe that we will do that. So we have 3 decks which we'll send through after the sessions. That should not be a problem. There's a question here, which I think if the screen could be shifted a bit. I can't see that screen very clearly, but I think what Rotimi has been able to close with is a clarion call to the industry in terms of the learning imperative. And I think that it is well received by those who are on the session. I think, yes, so this comment really, in essence, is saying that an internship will be great for reflective practice and would support classroom learning It's more of a comment, really, than a question. But Rotimi, what do you think about an internship as another leg of this entire learning framework?
That's an interesting question. Two things to it. Number one, I think really that the job needs to start at the top, which is why we've focused this. I don't know. I'm just bear with me. Okay, right. Which is why this is focused at the leadership first, because it's the leaders who make change. It's not the people at the internships. Normally are small. What do you call it? Normally done by junior execs, assistant managers, and so on and so forth, or even like new entrants into industry. Although I dare say, by the way, I actually also was, well, that wasn't an internship. I think it was a bit of a holiday fellowship, which I did over this, I think it was last summer with one or two companies in the CRM space. So that's number one. Number two, I think really what's even more important than internship is actually apprenticeships. I think there's a major problem, which we all know that is going on in countries like Nigeria, which is youth unemployment. And the fact that we are creating a lot of people who are literate, but are not necessarily educated in terms of having transferable skills that can convert into their ability to be entrepreneurial in their own nature, even though we can see that there is a very powerful entrepreneurial ethos in the country of Nigeria, with the range of startups that are actually now winning international equity funding. So I think there is more, that's perhaps even more important. And I don't want to say this too much. I mean, when I was president of Expan, when I was working with the leadership teams at the National Institute of Marketing, part of the debate that I was always more than happy to support was this notion of building out vocational-based marketing education. Because a lot of our people, a lot of our young people in a country like Nigeria, clearly, and across West Africa and beyond, to be sincere with you, clearly, really, even if you're able to deliver for them articleships, which is vocational type education, they would indeed, in my view, be much more. So for instance, why can't we take mechanics to a level where he's not just a mechanic in that sense, but he's actually the creator of systems that work in terms of innovation? And if you think that that's a stupid idea, that's exactly what Germany did. The truth is, people see Germany and see big high-end industry, but the base of German engineering and the base of German ingenuity in terms of and its reputation is actually its vocational education, and by extension, the army of technicians that they have been able to create. And I think, if I'm wrong, given his experience, Stuart can tell me can correct me, and I will stand corrected. So I think that's what the conversation should be if we're looking at youths and entry. But the real work at this stage is the development of systems and processes and new approaches and philosophies. And that tends to be the responsibility of leaders who are at the senior level. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yeah, I think it does. As we begin to wrap up, there's a pervasive challenge which is not restricted to the marketing industry. And having a discussion with a lawyer and seeing the way this generation is very evasive when it comes to learning, and difficult, actually, that anything that involves deep learning becomes a huge challenge. And if you think about the graduates coming out of school, and the top end of that class, you have the consulting companies, and the financial institutions taking that level of talent. So where does the marketing industry stand in taking talent, especially where, as it were, a lot of our institutions are challenged from offering the basic foundational education which they're supposed to offer? So really, is it not garbage in, garbage out?
Well, I have a point of view. I see where you're going with that, Tunji, and to a certain degree, I will absolutely agree with you and those who hold that. But then also, I guess over the last 3.5 years, as I kind of decided to also step away from a bit of operational, or as in Nigeria, we call it hustle, to just spend a bit of a sabbatical to think, reflect, and hopefully write the elusive book. I've come to also understand a bit more now about education, which I probably did not before. And that is that you need, just the same way as we meet the customer at their point of need. And it's not that the customer meets us at our point of need. It's the same thing with the delivery of education. The truth is that the educational systems that we have across a lot of sub-Saharan Africa, in fact, the Commonwealth, let me use that because it is all, to a certain degree, part of the colonial heritages we have of our relationship with the United Kingdom, who were colonial masters to us in the last, and the educational systems that they brought, and which our new leaders did not understand needs to be dismantled and reorganized in a new system, in a new way. You need to meet the millennial at their own point. The millennial needs certain, I mean, let me give you a case in point. For many years, I used to quarrel with my son on why he was playing video games, until I suddenly realized one day, later on in his late teens, that how much that those games had helped him to create skills that were relevant to the modern world. Now, gamification, the way in which we're delivering content, even the nature of the content, the type of education, and that's the point I was making when we talk about pedagogies. There's a lot of work to be done in completely changing the way marketing, commercial education is provided to young people all over the world. A lot of societies that are very reflective have started to do that and are way ahead. But there is a lot of work to be done. And maybe the part of the reasons why it's difficult, because sometimes innovation requires a profit and loss statement to be able to really justify it. And it's patient capital that it requires. But thank God that there is this new world of EdTech where some of us have now started to develop interest in. And those are the kinds of things we need to do. Learning is not sitting down in front of a blackboard with an open textbook. And that's not what learning is. That's a delivery mechanism. Learning is when an aha moment, when a reflective moment happens. And that can happen in different systems, in different ways, at different times. In fact, fast learning, today's learning, cannot be delivered in those traditional formats of you waiting to gather 15 people into a room. And this is the point that we're making. The moment it starts to become interesting to the millennials and the generation Alpha, who are the ones who are now taking over the world as we quietly go into retirement somewhere, and then hopefully maybe are able to afford to live near a golf course, then, that's what we need to do. So I do hope that we do need to do this. And I'm really passionate. I'm grateful for those. I mean, like you, Tunji, I'm really so grateful for you stepping, on this journey to take us to hopefully where we're able to hand over to the next set of people. I hope that answers the question somewhat.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Rotimi. We're very conscious of the time.
Yes, indeed.
And I have a couple of people in the studio who are who are also looking at me. Some of them have been here for since we started. So I think, thankfully, and also some of those who have joined us online from the beginning, it's been a worthwhile time spent together from this morning on this May Day. I'll quickly go through the other certificate presentation so that we can then take the vote of thanks and close the session shortly.
Before you just do that, Tunji, permit me half a minute or less to say thank you, because I know our Lolo, Miriam will do that, but just to also add my own personal thank yous, because that, I'll be going off the spotlight shortly, to every single person who has kind of contributed to this, both at the delivery side of the value as well as the receiving side of the value, because without those who are wanting to receive, value systems don't work. So thank you exceedingly for your support.
Thank you very much, Rotimi. Thanks for that. Mr. Ogunlano Olumide, are you here? Ogunlano Olumide is not here. And if you're joining us late, just understand these certificates are from some of the courses that we started earlier in the year. Kende Oloke. Kende Oloke. Let's put our hands together for Kende. He's been taking photographs in. Igodalo got sent. Igodalo is one of the most patient. I think he was one of those who came early for this session. Let's put our hands together for him. Ernest Igbokwe. Ernest Igbokwe. Emmanuel Joshua. Yeah, let's put our hands together for Emmanuel. Caroline Mahmoud Lawal. Caroline Mahmoud Lawal. Atan Lucy Kinde. Adiremi Olumide. Taiwo Fijabi. Let's put our hands together for Taiwo. It's Ifunaya Olisemeka. Ifunaya is actually one of the two distinctions that we have. We announced the first distinction, the first session. Let's put our hands together for Ifunaya. Sholaru Oluwamuyiwa Okbayami, I think we said that earlier. And then, okay. Is there anyone here who is expecting a certificate that hasn't received one? What's your name, sir? Victor, what's the surname? I think I mentioned. Ude Victor Chigoze. Let's put our hands together for Victor. So at this point, I will be handing over to Tokwe, who would be giving the vote of thanks as we close the session.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the founder and publisher, ExperientialNG, Dr. Rotimi Olaniyan, Mr. Tunji Adeyinka, course director, my humble self, and of course, the members of ExperientialNG. I wish to thank everybody that has made this a memorable day for us. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Mr. Austin Ufomba, who has taken out time to share his knowledge in both the FMCG group and the banking sector in strategic thinking. Also, Stuart Hamilton has been very good with teaching us about the practical commercial leadership. I mean, showing his wealth of experience in leadership coaching. Of course, a knowledge-based firm, and we're serving as a capacity development and resource platform for practitioners and firms playing in the marketing and allied services. And if we do not have people to participate in our courses, there will be no ExperientialNG. So before I start mentioning the names of the agencies that have been supportive from the beginning of this, I would like to say a big thank you to Abelinis, who are actually behind the hybrid studios. They've done marvelously well. I mean, they've put everything that you see today together. They've been quite supportive from the beginning. And I would say that they've done so well, and they are the brains behind today's event. Also, I'll say a big thank you to Emporium, the Livera Group, Brainbox, Berlin is again, Connect Marketing, Ideas House, Tribes, Max Connection, and everybody that has also participated in the courses that we've done, both people that are here today and the people that were not able to make it. Thumbs up for Ezine and Ifunaya for making a distinction in our program. And as we promised, you will still be getting a scholarship from us. Of course, I have to mention our partners, the Francis Tansley. So we thank everybody. And we've come to the end of the program. We'll be looking forward to having other people in the courses that we would be having, especially the next set of courses that we'll be having for leaders. And it's going to be on leading strategically. We'll also be taking managers on core marketing strategy. So we're hoping to see you again in some of the other courses that we would be rolling out very soon. Thank you very much, and God bless. Thank you.
Oh, are you asking?
What do you think?
No, I'm recording now.
I'm supposed to look into this one.
Another thing, will it be possible the focus will be showing her?
My name is Ezinel Kalangwa and I represent Mass Connection Agency.
Have you shared with us your experiences with the last session?
Okay, it was a very, very interesting 3 weeks. Very mind blowing. Special thanks to the faculty as well because they did a brilliant job. For every session we had, it was revealing. It was wow, wow, wow. So it was almost like, oh, I just learned something here, and I think I've reached the peak. The next one amazes you. So it was really, really brilliant, and the faculty had a lot of depth, and their wealth of experience was very, very obvious and was impactful. Thank you.
Come out with distinction.
Yes, I did.
What do you think gave you the edge?
First things first, yes, commitment, excellence, which is one of my key values. And whatever I put my hands on, whatever it is I decide to be part of, I like to come out as the best. Secondly, my company, which is my agency, which is Mass Connection, has been in line with all that we have been taught. So it was more like I was now getting like a secondary information. So they had laid the foundations for me, which was what I improved on, which was what the courses improved on, sorry. Thank you.
Your opinion, how relevant is training in the marketing communication industry?
Well, it's very, 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 very important. It's not debatable at all because, of course, the way I stepped into the course was not the way I left. I left with a whole lot of knowledge and a whole lot of insight, which is further going to help how I would address marketing communication strategies and the likes. It was really, really, really impactful. It's not a debatable subject. Training is always key. Yeah.
Okay, now, what advice do you have for young people, new entrants, and other in the industry as well as training?
Oh, okay. So I think for every level which you find yourself at the marketing strata, it's important that you are always learning because you never finish learning. So whatever point it is you have gotten to, always know that there is more, and that should be a motivating factor for you to constantly learn and look for mentors, especially people or our leaders in this field and learn from them. And this is also a course that I would recommend for everybody in the experiential marketing world, So I would recommend this course for everyone. It's very, very, very important that we upscaling our skills at all times. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'll start with the communication platform first. I think we had an excellent communication platform. All communications was clear, concise, and very precise. The faculty did well to distill every of our models. And also special thanks to Dr. Rotimi Olanio, the convener of this. It was a brilliant work from start to finish. I remember we always have review sessions on Sunday evenings just to make sure that everyone understand what has been taught so far, to highlight your challenges or areas where you have issues so that it can be clarified and so that we are all on the same page. I think that's the best thing that can ever be done to a student. And that was brilliant, very brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My name is Ifna Lisaimika. I work with Brainbox Marketing. It's situated in Ikeja, Lagos. It was quite interesting because at the time when the training was ongoing, I had projects that I was handling at the same time. So it was quite like a lot of work at the same time because there was actual work and there was classes to attend and there was projects to write. But it was really enlightening for me because I was able to learn and use the knowledge gained at the time still in the project I was handling. So yes, it was quite a good experience. Yes, I did. So I would like to first say that my experience so far with Brainbox Marketing and it's really helped with the wealth of clients I had worked with, I think also helped me in handling the classes better and as well as the projects that we did at the end of the class. So yes, that's what I would say helped. Then also being able to manage my time, manage the resources that were shared during the classes also helped me as well. I would say training in general, regardless of what niche you are in, is really important because every day there are new methods, there are new ideologies, there are new techniques, new technologies that would help and aid what you do, whether it's marketing communication or elsewhere, but specifically marketing communication because we are dealing with people. So it is really important that every day or every time, every opportunity you have to learn, you take learning seriously and which is why it was really nice or really important what Experiential NG did because it was at a time where it seems like there were little or limited trainings in the marketing communications strata. So yes, big one to Experiential NG. Is to keep learning, keep learning, keep learning, regardless of how many years you spent in the industry. Like I said, there are every day there is new technology, people are learning and unlearning. So you need to be able to learn, unlearn, relearn in the industry because times have changed, things are changing. Who would have known that with the outbreak of COVID-19, that the experiential marketing space wouldn't suffer as people thought it would. And that's because people have been able to learn new strategies, new areas, or new ways to interact with our target audience. So, yes, learning is very important, and everybody should keep learning. It was quite interesting. Really, really interesting. I had like really amazing faculty, like people with an immense depth of knowledge. I kept being like, wow, oh my, they did that. So yes, it was really interesting having to learn at the feet of people who have like years and years and years of experience. So yes, that was like a big one for me. So that's what I say. It was interesting. It was eye-opening. It was enlightening. Thank you.
I don't think it's an interview, like an appreciation. So I think an appreciation. So is it an interview or an appreciation? Okay, so my name is Igodalo Guts, and I currently work with Ideas House Marketing Communication, Magodo. I just want to say a big thank you to our sponsor, that's Mr. Salami Kehinde, who has given us the opportunity to experience this training, and we've learned a whole lot. I also want to say thank you to the organizers of this training program. It's really an eye-opening one. I think we had a whole lot in a short time, and I would like to suggest that for programs like this, you can have it a little bit stretched. I also want to thank my colleagues, because it was not really easy for every one of us, because we had a couple of projects going, and then we still had to attend and then still do quite well. So I want to thank every one of them and then everybody. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Tafolonsho from Tribes Marketing Nigeria Limited. The whole program of Experiential NG, this course has been so interesting, fantastic, and robust. I've learned a lot, and that there are a lot of weight of experiences from our mentors, our instructors. They have really tried out their best in order to impart on us. And personally, I have learned a lot. It has been an high hope now for me to rejig myself and to have positive impact on my agency, to continue and make an edgeway.
Okay, my name is Ude Victor Chigozie. A project executive from Brainbox Marketing. I want to thank Experiential NG for putting up this course. It's indeed an insightful one. And from when we started till this moment and going forward, I'll be imparting what I've learned into projects that I'm executing. Once again, thank you to all the organizers of the course and to my MD, Mr. Femi Adelusi, for granting me the opportunity to be a part of this learning platform. Thank you and God bless.